Good morning and welcome to the Mike Graham Show. I'm Mike Graham. We're going a bit early this morning because we just thought we might go boo to see whether or not you were paying attention. Partly because I've had hardly any sleep at all and I'm a bit punch drunk, obviously. I was on Dan Wootton's show last night talking about all the things that were going on in Makerfield, the by-election result, and I got home and I thought, you know what, I'll be fine because I'll get home at about 1 o'clock and I'll get, 4 hours sleep? That'll be perfect. But of course I got home and because the adrenaline was pumping and I knew that there was going to be a result coming in, I didn't go to sleep at all until about sort of 4-ish, which meant I had about an hour's sleep because I wanted to see the result. First of all, the result came in from Aberdeen South, which showed that the Conservatives actually won a seat, which is quite a big deal as well, by the way, which we'll talk about in terms of how the SNP have sort of faded into oblivion. And it's the first time, I think, for a while that Kemi Badenoch's actually won a seat in Scotland, so that's good. Rafe Heidel-Menku is also here to share with us the joys of spring and the joys of what happened last night. Because there's quite a lot to unpack, isn't there? There's quite a lot of sort of... good morning, by the way. There's quite a lot of different strands to the story. You know, one of the things that I got into last night was with the kind of the crazed restorists like Conor Tomlinson and Dan Wootton, who's very much like that. Ola Minahan was there as well. You know, they were all going, you know, this shows that there's an alternative to Nigel Farage. You know, Nigel Farage has been damaged by reform. They didn't do as well in the end as they thought they were going to do, because at one point, Rupert Lowe was talking about, you know, we're going to surprise an awful lot of people, i.e. we're going to win the seat. I mean, he was kind of hinting they were going to win the seat, which I never thought they were. But I did wonder whether they'd get above 10%. What I said last night was if they don't get above 10%, I don't think that's a particularly good night for them. What do you think?
Well, firstly, this was the most consequential by-election since 1938. This is very, very intense. The appeasement by-election of 1938, hugely important on many levels. But yes, the key takeaway, because of this 55% of the vote went to Andy Burnham.
Yeah, and it was a big turnout, wasn't it?
With a bigger turnout than the general election.
Yeah, 59% turnout,
and 55% of the votes went to Andy Burnham. What that tells you is that the left were voting tactically. They weren't all Labour voters. They were Greens, they were Lib Dems, I'm sure maybe a few wet Tories.
There were some Tories as well,
were voting for Andy Burnham.
Yeah.
So the key takeaway is you have to unite the right, because the left understand this. In every single general election of the 21st century, there have been more votes cast for left-wing parties than for right-wing parties, except for 2015. That means the only reason we had strong Tory government is because there was only one party on the right.
Yeah, right.
The left was split. The left understand that. That's why they all voted for one person to beat reform.
Right.
And if we don't unite the right, then there's no chance of winning any right-wing government at the next general election. People need to wake up to that. That's the first point. Second point is, look, Restore's policies, many of them I support. I've got good friends at Restore. But there is, the reality people need to know, this is about mathematics. And our viewers, you, me, we probably all share the Restore and Reform's policies. Most of the British public aren't yet with us. There is a 10% ceiling for Restore in this country. This is what Sir John Curtis, the great guru of polling, has said. There's about a 35% ceiling for Reform, 10% ceiling for Restore. You have to unite those two together, otherwise there's no hope of winning election. And people need to decide what's more important, voting for the party that I really want to vote for, or stopping Andy Burnham. Well, the left know what to do. They voted for Andy Burnham, even though they're Green Party supporters. And, you know, remember this, people think Labour is unelectable. You know, everyone thought Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party was destroyed. No one thought it was going to come back because he had destroyed the country. Well, Mark Carney came in, and suddenly there's this huge support now for the Liberal Party in Canada and for Mark Carney. Andy Burnham is going to bring back to the Labour Party a lot of those Green Party voters who left the Labour Party. They're coming back to him as well. And he's going to be even more disastrous than Keir Starmer for the country, but that's because he's going to be appealing to those left-wing voters who are going to potentially keep Labour in power, potentially, at the next general election.
And so in terms of the way that he succeeded last night in getting the vote not only organised, but increased, if you like, because I think they got an even bigger number and a share of the vote than they had in 2024, you know, when Josh Simons won the seat. And so they've actually, I mean, you know, I think I'm listening to various different media this morning and since last night, they're almost ecstatic in Labour headquarters because they're thinking, you know, what we've now worked out is that actually the problem is not Labour. The problem is Keir Starmer. And as soon as we get rid of Keir Starmer, and as soon as we misidentify from him, we will be in clover again. And so the question, I suppose, for the rest of us is that how soon do they unseat Keir Starmer? How soon does Andy Burnham go and have that conversation? We were told yesterday, I think the Times had a piece saying that he's going to go to Downing Street. He's not going to immediately challenge him, but he's going to say to him, you need to tell me when you're leaving. Yeah. You need to give me some kind of off-ramp. You need to tell me when your timetable for leaving Downing Street is. So in some ways, I'm quite sort of happy, because I hate Keir Starmer. I think he's been useless for this country. I think he's damaged the country irrevocably. I think he's been an awful Prime Minister, and I'm very happy to see him go, whether it be at the hands of Andy Burnham or Nigel Farage. I don't care. However, as you say, Burnham won't be any better.
Burnham won't be any better, even worse actually, because the bond markets, the person who is most campaigning for a job under Burnham is Ed Miliband, Ed the Red Miliband. And even Ed Miliband knows if he becomes Chancellor as well, there's going to be a huge disaster with the bond markets. So they're already war planning how to deal with that situation. Look, Keir Starmer has been very stubborn. Keir Starmer said, I'm not going to go down without a fight. I'm going to stand. Yeah. I'm going to stand. After the level of support for Andy Burnham, that's completely changed the situation.
I don't think he will. I think
and it's very difficult now to see how he would stand for election in the next contest. So we could have a coronation, because if Starmer resigns, I don't think Wes Streeting and Healy and others are going to want to have a contest against Andy Burnham.
Because it will look churlish, won't it? They'll end up looking bad. And also,
and you're attacking somebody who you want everyone to get around. You don't want to start airing his dirty linen in public. You know, obviously this man has got the wind in his sails behind him, and so then the question becomes: does Andy Burnham call an early election, perhaps? Because he's got this honeymoon period. Yeah. I think the more the people get to know him, the more they'll realise how superficial and vacuous he actually is.
Yes, which indeed is what happened in Makerfield, because we found out, I think, just the day before yesterday, that as he became more and more exposed to the public voters, they actually had less and less faith in him, and his popularity dropped the more he actually went out and met people.
His popularity dropped the more people got to know him. Yeah, but the point is, for me, he's still got now a new voting bloc that Starmer didn't have, and that's the left. The left who abandoned him and thought he was too right-wing. Yeah. They're going to come back to the Labour Party. And also now, people are so scared of reform, they've painted reform as some pantomime villain, thinking that they're real fascists. They're actually 1980s Tories, but they're portrayed as fascists. So the left are really scared about reform becoming in the government. So you're going to see tactical voting there as well. So even if his popularity does drop, there's still going to be a huge incentive to vote for him and for Labour in order to keep reform up, which is why the right really does need to get its game together.
And in terms of an early election, if he was to call one, do you think that he could succeed and get, say, a further 5-year term, because the right is kind of divided, because the right is not terribly well organised? I mean, I said this last night. I was on Dan Wootton's show, and we'll play a little clip from it, hopefully a little bit later on this morning. I've been disappointed, I think would be the best way to describe the way that Reform had kind of gone about Makerfield and the campaign, because they sort of set out to say that this was the most important by-election of all time. And, you have to be really careful, because we need to make sure that, we beat Andy Burnham in order to get rid of Keir Starmer. But as time went on, they sort of stepped away from it, and they sort of stepped back from it, and they kind of left Rob Kenyon as the candidate, sort of slightly, I would say, isolated on his own, trying to kind of defend it, And I know that Nigel Farage would argue that he was there every single day. He was up there campaigning.
3 hours yesterday.
Richard Tice was there as well. Sarah Poachin was there. I think Robert Jenrick was there. I don't remember saw Danny Kruger, but they did throw the kitchen sink at it at the beginning, but by the end of it, by yesterday, it was kind of like, does it look as though now you've kind of given up?
Well, I think they knew the polls, how things were going in the polls. But I think the question
is... Because they should have won it, though, is what I'm saying.
Well, the thing is, they would have won it. All the polls shows that had anybody else other than Andy Burnham stood there, Reform would have won. Yes. It was only Andy Burnham that changed things around. Right. So that's the first thing to say. And as I said, the left have coalesced now. The left now know how to vote tactically because the vote share went down for all the other left-wing parties.
And does that mean, therefore, that not so much reform failed, but that there is a certain unassailability about people like Andy Burnham, who are famously kind of, recognisable as local mayors? I mean, Nigel Farage gave an interview yesterday in which he said, I think to Kamala Tominey on the Telegraph, he said he's only just really realised this, but when Boris Johnson was mayor of London, he was a very popular figure. People liked him because when you're mayor of a city, you get to do all the good things that people kind of tick a box for. You get to shake and you kiss a lot of babies and open a lot of buildings and do all sorts of good things. And Burnham kind of has been that guy in Manchester.
But that was it. He was a local candidate, and that's the thing.
So the fact that they had a local candidate in Rob Kenyon was kind of wiped out, if you like. Yeah,
well, to a degree, you could say that's the case. Yeah, if Andy Burnham had been standing in Devon, I don't know how the results would have been compared to in Makerfield. That's a huge part of it. But I think questions do need to be asked about whether Robert Kenyon was the best candidate to put forward. Yes, a local man, a plumber, all of that ticks boxes. But I think the stuff that came out about his social media, the very crass stuff he said, people said, oh, nobody cares about that outside the Westminster bubble. I actually think some people do care about common decency, the sort of thing. Nobody likes, none of our viewers like Carol Vorderman.
I mean, he was the candidate in the 2024 election as well, and that stuff never came out.
No, but that's because there's intense media. This was such an important by-election.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Remember Chuka Onuma? He was in frontline politics for ages. As soon as he tried to stand for the leadership, suddenly everybody discovered the stuff about his family and so forth. So there is more intense scrutiny there. But yes, if you are going to put a candidate into something that's such an important by-election, there really should be more due diligence done and more vetting to avoid that. And I don't know what percentage of people may have been voting for Andy Burnham simply because they didn't want this type of person to be their MP. That could have been part of it too.
But does that also tell you a bit about reform and their kind of slightly amateurish approach to selection, slightly amateurish approach to everything, that they're not quite ready? I mean, I said again last night on Dan Wootton's show that maybe there's still enough time. If there isn't an election, a general election until 2029, there's enough time for them to sort of, fix the party, if you like. But what this seems to have shown, and I'm happy to be corrected, and I'm happy for Nigel Farage to come on and tell me I'm talking absolute rubbish, that they're not quite ready. They haven't quite got it right.
Well, in their defence, they have professionalised a huge amount.
They have.
And they've understood the fact that they've had their biggest... I mean, Nigel knows full well, from UKIP to the Brexit Party to Reform, the crazy characters that have basically been standing for elections and that have embarrassed him routinely. You remember the chap who said that the hurricanes and storms were because of God's homophobia against gay rights in Britain and so forth. Now they've come a long way from there. Look, they've got brand new offices. They've got media training. They had Jeremy Kyle giving candidates media training. They've got a much better company now doing vetting.
And they've got ownership of an awful lot of councils around the country.
Yeah, so they understand now that they need to professionalise. But of course, I'm pretty sure for them, professionalising is a long process. So it would take, basically, they probably had a 3 or 4 year programme, and this by-election has come too early for them to be fully professionalised.
Yes. Meanwhile, of course, the other story, in addition to whether or not Labour have kind of rebalanced themselves and sort of re-emerged as a party that can run the government for the next couple of years, what about the whole Restore conversation? Because there was lots of talk before the actual announcement of the numbers that Restore were going to surprise an awful lot of people. I mean, I think Rupert Lowe's own words were, he was certainly hinting as if they were going to actually win the election at one point. And certainly if they weren't going to win the election, they would be up around about 15 to 25% of the vote. And it turns out they got less than 7% of the vote.
Yes, well, as I said, there is only a ceiling of 10% for Restore. If you look at the public polling, most people, for example, in this country, don't get their news from GB News or from Twitter or the Telegraph. They're still watching mainstream television. So the issues that energise us aren't the issues that actually energise a great sweep of the population. I still go to events where people haven't heard about the rape gangs. It's unbelievable,
Really?
And so, and these are professionals. There were doctors, lawyers and stuff who haven't heard about this sort of stuff. So we have to realise that the issues that are so important to us, there's so much ignorance still amongst the general population, many of whom also aren't that politically engaged. So whilst we may see online this huge support for Restore, it's actually not reflected in the real world. And all of the experts, as I said, like John Curtis, they say on these key topics and issues, there's a 10% ceiling for Restore. There's around a 35% ceiling for Reform. And it's the same thing with the Green Party. They've got a ceiling on the left. And so you can't actually win a general election. This is what Jeremy Corbyn and that side found out. You can't win an election just by having such strong policies, even though they're the policies we need. To reach across, you do need to appear to be more centrist.
Yes.
That's why I was always hoping that the secret of Reform would be that they would do what Tony Blair did. Tony Blair appeared more centrist. Once he got into power, he unleashed a revolution nobody was prepared for.
Right.
But that was the only way he could get into power.
Yeah.
If he had been campaigning and saying, "Well, actually, we're going to have a long march through institutions. We're going to take over everything,"
but that's where, for me, an awful lot of the arguments between Restore and Reform kind of fall down and appear to be, cannibalistic, if you like, because you're right. They, in order to get in, you need to be somewhere in the middle. You can't be out there. You can't be out there. You have to be in the middle in order to get elected by the majority of the people in the country. And then you can do whatever it is you want to do if you get the mandate.
And I think I think that is Reform's reasoning. I think Reform wants to appear more mainstream, knowing that that's the only way you can get a majority government. And then once you're in power, then you can start doing stuff that is actually more radical, that needs to be done. At least that's a leap of faith. You have to say, well, that's a gamble. Are they going to do it or are they not?
Right.
But the worst situation is, of course, splitting the vote, having either a Labour majority government or a Labour minority in coalition with the Greens. Andy Burnham has said he will have a coalition with the Green Party. Or you end up having a right-wing coalition between the Tories and Reform, and that's a disaster because, of course, that's going to water down any manifesto. You're not going to have anything there. You need to have a majority government of a real right-wing government, not some pseudo-conservative party involved in that, to get the policies you need to have there. But it's a very, very tricky situation now where things are far less certain than they were 6 months ago.
So would you say, for example, that Reform are in a worse place today than they were, 3 months ago?
Yes, I think it's a much more difficult route to get into. I mean, I remember a year ago, Nigel was saying, the path is clear for us to win at the next election. We can see it now. There was such enthusiasm and energy, and I think yesterday probably was the worst day for them for years.
Yeah, I mean, somebody said to me...
Because remember also, they've got Restore at 6.8, they got Andy Burnham at 55% in Makerfield, and in Arbroath, the Tories won.
Well,
so they can't even say the Tories are dying.
I was going to take you up to Scotland, where basically there were 3 by-elections, 2 in Scotland, 1 in Makerfield, and the Restore Party, the Reform Party as an entity, didn't win any of the seats, and so you have to ask the question: are they sort of going backwards?
Yeah, well, there's going to be a lot of head scratching this weekend and in the weeks ahead about how they actually devise a new strategy now. Do they have to steer more to the right to park their tanks where Restore is? Now, look, that's something that I would prefer. I want to, as I said, we need radical, conservative, right-wing policies to save this country, the sorts of policies that both Reform and Restore are coming out with. Do they do that? But then, of course, they're going to risk alienating people that they need to win the next general election. It's a very tricky path. I think they can become more right-wing. I think they need to be more strident. I think that's one of the good things about Restore is that they've already dragged Reform to the right on a lot of things. But if you want to get the keys to number 10 Downing Street, you need to play the bigger game. And this is all about mathematics.
Yeah.
This is not about anything else at the end of the day.
Right.
And what combination of policies will get us the most votes?
But the thing that I find sort of slightly nauseating this morning, and I was listening on the way into a Labour MP being interviewed on Times Radio, who was full of the joys of spring, wouldn't answer any of the questions that were about, what are the difficulties that are going to face Labour going forward, because this has given them a kind of almost a new beginning. They're all obviously running around saying this is great. This shows that Labour is still, the party that people want to be in charge. It shows that we're going to be reborn. It shows that we're going to move away. And when you say, but does that mean that you've abandoned Keir Starmer? They don't want to go there. They don't want to sort of diss Keir Starmer, but they're by sort of their own admission saying, well, we're ready for a new beginning. I.e., Andy Burnham walks into Downing Street, and I think it's a terrible precedent, really, for the British, state, if you like, that somebody like Andy Burnham can suddenly nominate himself as the next Prime Minister of this country, nominate a constituency in which he's going to run, tell the incumbent MP to move out of the way in order for him to get in, and suddenly, before you know where you're going, you've got a new Prime Minister. And that does not seem like a very democratic process to me.
Well, and the irony, of course, is that after you got Theresa May and then Boris Johnson and then Liz Truss and then Rishi Sunak, it was people like Andy Burnham who said this is indefensible.
Right.
You can't just change Prime Minister.
Of course.
There needs to be a general election.
And at least
now the tables have turned. Suddenly they've got amnesia about having said any of that.
But at least when that happened, all of the people who were engaged in possibly becoming the next Prime Minister were already elected as MPs. Andy Burnham has specifically got himself elected in order to take over. And it just doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel like that's the kind of democratic process we should be doing.
See, I love politics, and that's how the Westminster model of politics works.
Yeah.
It's all about parties at the end of the day, so I don't get animated about it. For me, it's more about the hypocrisy of people who basically have been lambasting the Tories for doing this, and now they're engaged in the same thing. I quite like the shenanigans of politics that enable you to parachute somebody, and I think it's quite clever and fun. Because ultimately, you do vote not for a prime minister, you vote for a party in our system. We don't have a presidential style system like you have in America. And of course, remember, the Tories did the same thing. Remember, remember how depressed the whole nation was under Theresa May. How like a millstone around our necks, all the Brexit shenanigans. As soon as Boris came, everybody seemed to be elated. He was talking up the country. He was positive. Things are going to get done. And it did seem like there was a new party. I think much the same is going to be the feeling with Andy Burnham. It's going to be very much like Johnson after May. But then, of course, look what Boris Johnson did. Betrayed us.
Yes.
The biggest act of vandalism with the Boris wave.
Does that also tell you more about the way that the public are willing to kind of buy the snake oil salesman? They're willing to buy the charismatic figure. They're willing to sort of go, well, we quite like Rafe because, he makes us laugh, and he dresses well and, he's got a nice looking wife and let's give him a go. And I wonder if that's kind of a detriment to what we actually are trying to do as a nation.
It's hugely worrying now. Just think about it. We're on, what is it, our 7th or 8th Prime Minister in 10 years. I mean, we're in the land of Italian Ruritanian farce, right?
Well, do you remember in the old days when we used to laugh at Italy and go, well, they got a new Prime Minister every 2.5 days.
And you see it.
That's what it's like here.
You see it on Remembrance Sunday when all the former Prime Ministers are lined up by the cenotaph. And it's absolutely crazy. And I now think, well, obviously, what this shows you is it that we've just had bad luck and we've had 7 really incompetent and inadequate people in a row, or does it actually show us something more fundamental about our politics? And I actually don't think it's likely we're going to get another Thatcher or Tony Blair who was able to get 3 re-elections with huge majorities. I think we're so divided now as a nation. We're in blocks, so you've got 30% voting for reform, you've got 30% in the polls, 25% voting for the Green Party, 20% for Labour. There is no one seems to be able any longer to capture the 40% of the country that used to vote for Thatcher or for Blair. So it looks like to me, people are going to get tired of every candidate now after 2-3 years. So we're never going to have those long, great periods. What you need in a government to actually change things is just going to be more of the same thing. They're going to be promises. There's so much distrust for politicians. Social media destroys people all the time. That basically most of the country will always hate the Prime Minister now, and only about a third will like him. And that's a really difficult state to be in.
And do you then follow on from that with some people's view that the country's now ungovernable? And it doesn't matter who you put in charge, you literally can't run the government in a way which is efficient or in a way which is likeable or in a way which is actually successful as the ordinary people of Britain would see it.
Well, that's my point. That's what I'm trying to say. This is where we've got to now, where you're only going to be appealing to or pleasing 1/3 of the population. And the point there is you only need to have 32% of the vote to win a majority. That's what we've seen with Keir Starmer, 400 seats in Parliament, and he's got only about a 32% share of the vote. So just by appealing to your core, you're actually alienating 2/3 of the country. And that, to me, is a very bad state. And, of course, you have to still, even with that 1/3, you've not been able to deliver. So the Tories had 1/3 of the vote, and look what they did after 14 years. They betrayed the British nation. And if you'd say you do get a right-wing government in, if they don't deliver, After all the lies and betrayal of the Tories and of Brexit being betrayed, if you get in a right-wing government and they don't reverse mass immigration, they don't do mass deportations, they don't have voluntary remigration, the British people will feel betrayed yet again, and then their faith in democracy will perhaps be forever.
But Andy Burnham will do none of those things.
No.
And I mean, the thing that I find interesting is that if he does walk into Downing Street, by whichever means he chooses to do it, whether it's, telling Keir Starmer to bugger off, or whether he's telling Keir Starmer that, we'll have a leadership election or whatever. Say, for example, he's in charge in a month's time. There's no money in the Treasury. He can't do anything about the welfare bill because his backbenchers won't allow him to do so. He can't really spend any extra money on defence, which is what led to the resignation of John Healey and Al Khan's. There's literally, he's in a sort of straitjacket of his own making, if you like.
Well, I mean, this is going to be the test of the man. Is he simply going to please his own backbench voters and try to win over his people that he's lost to the Green Party and go more to the left? We could see that. That's going to spook the markets, of course. But if you've got someone like Ed Miliband as his chancellor, there's every chance you're going to see something like that happening. Or is he going to become a statesman and realise the condition that we're in? Look, he can easily increase defence spending. He just needs to get rid of the two-child benefit cap.
Right.
That was a choice.
You make it sound easy, though, but he can't do that because the backbenchers will say, no, we don't want to do that.
But that's what I mean.
This is going
to be the test of the man. So, I mean, it was too early. We can't predict what he's going to do, but interesting times.
Very interesting times.
I've got a comment here. Can Rafe answer this?
Yes, absolutely. A couple of comments to come up. What do the 55% who voted for Burnham think that he will actually deliver for them? Good question.
Yeah, well, the answer is...
Question.
Is it your question?
Sure.
I want to know. I want to know.
Okay.
What do you think, Rafe?
I think it's like the Obama fact. It's hope. I think they were just so disappointed by Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
They were, because remember, he campaigned to take over from Jeremy Corbyn. He promised to be a left-wing socialist, essentially. Yes. And of course, as soon as he got into office, he became something more like a Blairite. And I think people are just so distraught. So there's two things. They don't know what he's going to deliver because he doesn't know what he's going to deliver himself. He's not said much on what he's going to deliver, but it's more the image and the messaging. He's somebody of the left. He's one of their own people. And I think it's also this fact that they are so scared and petrified of Reform, who they think are some fascist party, that they want the best candidate that they think's got a chance to beat them. That's why you've seen the tactical voting take place as well. So I think it's a combination of those things. And it just goes to show you, remember, Andy Burnham is a loser. This is a man who twice stood to run the party, and he lost. The last time he lost was to Jeremy Corbyn, who himself was a failure.
But this is the other thing about the sort of the myth that has been built around Andy Burnham as the king of the North. One, I speak to people in Manchester. He's not the king of the North. There's plenty of people in Manchester who will tell you that he hasn't been a great mayor at all. But Nigel Farage yesterday gave an interview to The Spectator, I think it was, in which he said people who are metropolitan mayors tend to be much more popular. They do have name recognition. They do have a sort of an image, if you like. They do have an ability to sort of con the public into believing that they've done great things for the local neighbourhood, even though they haven't.
Yeah, well, he is a snake oil salesman. I mean, that's just it. And you can just see the way that he's trying to portray himself as being one of them. I'm not part of that Westminster bubble. I'm sorry, his entire career is perfectly the same as it was for David Cameron, as it was for Ed Miliband. He was a special advisor. He studied PPE, I think. He is part of the establishment. He's part of the problem, but he's managed to portray himself as being a man of the people.
Yes.
And unfortunately, many people on the left fall for all this nonsense and don't see through it. But I think it's just his popularity for a person who couldn't get elected as leader twice. The fact that he's achieved this now shows you how far our quality of leaders have fallen in this country now.
Yeah.
Because there's such a dearth of talent, such a dearth of anyone with any charisma, any charm, any aura, that now they found somebody with a modicum of charm and they've elevated him to superstar status.
When Richard Tice was in here on 2 days ago, I think it was, he said that we are seeing that there's likely to be a big turnout because an awful lot of people who haven't voted are going to come out and vote. To which I said, does that mean they're all going to vote for Restore? But it doesn't look like they did. It looks like an awful lot of people came out to vote, but I think was it 59% turnout, which is huge, bigger than the general election. and many of them clearly voted Labour.
Yes, I mean, so this was Restore's big thing. You know, we're going to reach like Heineken beer. We'll reach the parts other parties can't reach, and bring out much as happened during the Brexit campaign. Of course, people voted at Brexit who hadn't voted before. I'm really curious to see the age split here because young people don't tend to vote, and I think young people have been so distraught at Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. I think I would be very surprised if there wasn't a much bigger youth turnout because I think he appeals to the youth, Andy Burnham. And I think they would have come out in larger numbers than normal.
Yeah, very possibly. Before we let you go, let's talk about a couple of other stories in the. This is the most extraordinary story that is on the front pages, obviously for most of the papers, because they didn't carry the result of the by-election because it didn't come out till about 4 o'clock. Boy, aged 3, thrown to crocodiles in a zoo. Toddler critical after being thrown into crocodile pit at zoo is the front page of Daily Mail. I'm not quite sure what to say about it, really. I mean, this is something that happened in, I think it
Norfolk.
was, where are we? Cambridgeshire.
Oh, was it Cambridgeshire?
It was at some kind of horrified visitors inside a tropical reptile house at Johnston's of Oldhurst in Huntingdon, rather, in Cambridgeshire. The zoo is run by a fourth-generation farmer, Mr. Johnson, his wife and their sons George and Edward, says the Mail. This child was thrown by some crazed person who's been arrested. So I guess we have to be a bit careful about, what we say. But we don't know who the guy was. We don't know why he did it. But, I mean, it's a very bizarre story, isn't it?
It's a very strange story. As far as we know, there's no connection at all between the 3-year-old boy and this person who's now been charged with attempted murder for throwing this boy into... Now, we don't know how he ended up in there. Was he knocked in there? Was he thrown in there? We don't actually know how it precisely happened. But this chap was from Norfolk. We don't know anything more about him, how long he's been in Norfolk or anything like that. But it's just, it seems every day now there's more of this sort of clear evidence of mental illness or just general breakdown in society. Because I don't remember having front pages like this so regularly 20, 30 years ago. Something really demented is going on.
I mean, so clearly, it's a bit like when I was living in New York. I remember when Ronald Reagan was president and they emptied all of the kind of psychiatric units and allowed all these sort of nutters to wander about the streets. And you felt like you were living in some kind of, Mad Max world because you'd walk down the street and suddenly there'd be a guy naked sort of running up and down. And I wonder if that's part of the problem here, where you've got people who should be probably inside some kind of, protected environment, shall we say, who is walking around.
Oh, well, it's definitely the case. There are far too many people who should be sectioned who are walking on the streets. Firstly, it's also due to budget cuts and funding. But we saw this also, didn't we, with the Nottingham stabbings, the murders in Nottingham with Valdo Calderkane, who was the black chap who murdered brutally those 3 people. And what happened?
The schizophrenic who couldn't be detained as a schizophrenic because they'd already detained too many black people for being schizophrenic.
Precisely, took the words out of my mouth. So basically, they said, "Oh well, we've got too many black people who've been sectioned. We can't section him because it's going to look racist." Well, I'm terribly sorry. There comes a point where racism has to take a second back seat to health and safety, and we know that black men are, I think, 2.5 times more likely to have schizophrenia. I think four times more likely to be sectioned. There are real issues about certain ethnic communities and mental health. Same thing with asylum seekers. Far higher levels of mental health illness, unsurprising given the sorts of things that they've experienced and witnessed in their home countries that are war-torn, ravaged. So I think these sorts of things are... I have no idea what the ethnicity of this guy is, but we are seeing...
We're not told. We're told he's a British man.
But we are seeing, and from Norfolk, so there could be also an inbreeding issue there too. But we do know that we do know that there's a lot more mental health on our streets, and of course a lot of this is coming down to the fact that we're a much more multicultural country, and there's a much higher preponderance of mental health issues within the sorts of people that you see roaming around the bus stations and everything.
I would not be at all surprised if it turns out that this British man is not quite as British as they're making out. But who knows?
We don't know.
Should we have a bit of... can we play the Burnham clip?
Yeah,
have we got that?
Yeah, I've got a bit of the Burnham clip now. Yeah,
let's do a bit of the Burnham clip, just so that we remind ourselves of how amazing...
We don't have a Burnham warning yet.
We need to get a Burnham warning because, you know what you should get is Captain Black from the Mysterons.
Yes.
Because that's what he looks like, Captain Black from the Mysterons, who I think had some kind of music that went with it. But anyway, have a look at Andy Burnham accepting the offer to become the next Prime Minister of this country?
Everyone knows that politics isn't working. Everyone can feel that the country isn't where it should be. Tonight just could, be the turning point. From here on, I will give everything I have got to make it so, to ensure the name Makerfield is forever synonymous with bringing about the change this country needs. Bringing back something we've lost, hope for the future. I am proud that this place has shone in the world's spotlight these last 5 weeks. And the warmth, humour and hospitality of its people has been on show for all to see. It will never be a stepping stone to me, but instead will be my touchstone. A Makerfield test at the heart of British politics will ensure the places Westminster has neglected will now get fairness. I spoke in the campaign about the need to change politics. I promise to lead by example from the front as your Member of Parliament. I know people who traditionally vote for the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, and perhaps more recently, in May, for Reform UK, have given me their support in this election. I will always have respect to them for that, and out of respect for them, I will always take a place first rather than a party first approach, and I will focus on problem solving rather than point scoring.
I just object to the idea of a man who wants to be Prime Minister of this great country of ours who doesn't even have a shirt with a collar. I'm sorry, I know, call me old-fashioned, you know, I'm wearing a shirt with a collar, you're wearing a shirt with a collar. I don't see how difficult it is to wear a shirt with a collar if you're going to be representing Britain, right? Why is he wearing a round neck shirt like somebody out of New Order?
But it's just that sort of, you know, it was that big tech sort of thing, Apple, Steve Jobs, coffee in one hand,
I'm about to invent
trainers,
the
hey guys.
iCar.
Exactly,
right?
You know, just I'm one of you. Sit on the edge of on the corner of the table when you're talking to someone.
On screen, maybe that. Hold on.
Go on, show me.
That's
him.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Captain Black from the Mysterons. And Captain Black, of course, was the guy who sold out. And instead of being on the side of right, he ended up being on the wrong side and giving away things to the Mysterons.
Well, we should get some AI thing with his Andy Burnham's face imposed on there.
I'm sure that will happen.
Some super chats, Mike.
Super chats, yes, let's have them.
Here we go.
One from Mr. Woodward, who says, did Farage's party take the foot off the accelerator until it's on the Greater Manchester mayoralty? Well, that's another good, interesting question because, again, Richard Tice, when he was in here the other day, said that they might sort of more or less give up on losing the actual Makerfield by-election and concentrate more on winning the Manchester mayoralty because that would be worth more to them. Paul there, thank you very much indeed for you. One from Sunshine who says, so much calm common sense this morning. Thanks, Mike and Rafe. Well, I think we need calm common sense at the moment because we've got to be very careful that we don't sort of stoke up anything hatred-like. Orwellian nightmare says Makerfield will forever be associated with the destruction of the UK. Well, I don't think it will. One from Red Rock who says, still waiting to hear back about possibly appearing on the show of UK Live. I've had email conversations with Charlotte who offered a spot. I replied, I'm still waiting on a reply. I appreciate you are busy.
First I've heard of it.
Sorry, Red Rock, don't know what you're talking about. By all means, you can come on if you want. I don't know what you're going to come on and talk about. Oh no, Burnham alert, that says Russell. We need one, don't we? What can we cook up as a Burnham alert?
I'll surprise you.
It surprised me, yeah.
Something burning, I think.
Yes.
Big flames around the country.
You know what I enjoyed when the campaign was going on? That I think it was Guido Fawkes who nicknamed him Angry Burnham because he doesn't like being asked any questions. Whenever he's asked any questions, he sort of starts, stuttering and mumbling and shouting at people because he doesn't think it's their right to ask him anything.
Well, the thing about Andy Burnham is he's had a very easy ride. He's been Minister of Energy. He hasn't really
He was
had
Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport.
culture, media, and sport. But that's all easy stuff. Then he was mayor of Manchester.
Yeah.
Because everyone loves the mayor. When he's in the full spotlight of the media, as he's going to be now, and he's going to face intense scrutiny, intense questioning from real, dog-headed journalists. But also, when if he does become prime minister, which he will, how is he going to perform at PMQs?
I just can't see it. I mean,
This is what I mean. So he could actually have a short honeymoon.
yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm really not a fan. And this kind of, professional northerner thing really annoys me. I'm the king of the north. Are you? Really? Well, great. That doesn't mean anything to me. And just because you sound like you're from Manchester, and this other idea of Manchesterism, what does he stand for? Manchesterism. There's no such thing as Manchesterism, is there?
No, no one's ever defined it for me. And there's no such thing as Burnhamism either. So no one really knows who he is or what he stands for. Again, he's trying to basically do what Keir Starmer did and say whatever he needs to say in order to get into power.
Yeah. And so once then getting into power, do pretty much nothing at all that's of any benefit to the country. Because what we know is that if he tries to do anything which is of benefit to the country, there isn't any money for it. Because Rachel Reeves has seen to that there is literally no way to shoehorn any few pounds out of the exchequer to pay for anything.
Well, every cloud has a silver lining, and the greatest silver lining of all of this is that we know that Rachel from Customer Complaints isn't long for this for Parliament, right?
Yeah.
She's not going to be.
And there she is. And this is my favourite picture of her because as Richard III, as I said many, many times before yesterday, she looks more like Richard III than Richard III does. Right? Isn't that great? It's brilliant.
I've got a silver lining here, chaps.
You have?
Yeah,
Go
silver
on.
lining.
How about this? One good thing came out of Andy Burnham's wanker. It's easier to sing than Keir Starmer. Very possibly so. Maybe very possibly so. I don't know. Andy Burnham's a wanker. Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, because Keir is not a very good. It's only one syllable, isn't it, as opposed to two.
Ginger Keir.
I do worry that. I mean, that's the other story. I mean, we should poke fun at the Times because the Times has now become the sort of the mouthpiece of the Starmer government. Literally any policy that you'd like to float, give it to the Times, they'll put it on page one. They've actually written a story today saying Keir Starmer has a 6-figure war chest to fund his campaign to see off a leadership challenge. No, he won't be doing that.
I mean, the people who donated that money must be asking for a refund now, I would think.
I
hope
would
those are
imagine so.
IOUs rather than actual commitments.
Yeah. But it is extraordinary how the Times has fallen. And I don't like to criticise newspapers. I like to see newspapers do well. I like to see them succeed. But the Times, apparently, circulation-wise, is dying on its arse. And the reason why is because they keep endorsing this ridiculous Starmer government.
Well, I mean, it's been very interesting to see, actually, all the shenanigans of the various newspapers. I mean, it's been so blatant looking online and elsewhere over the last few days in Makerfield. I mean, there clearly was a concerted campaign to try to destroy Restore from some parties. And, it's just been a very dirty by-election. I've seen all sorts of tactics being done by all sorts of players and characters. Really, really gutter sort of politics in this by-election.
And that's where we are, because that's all that's been left for us. So if you're Nigel Farage this morning, final question to you. If you're Nigel Farage this morning, you're waking up, as he does at sort of 5 a.m. before he goes for his daily constitutional, what's he thinking?
Well, he's thinking, what is the best strategy now? We have to rethink desperately our messaging and our approach to the public. Do we veer more to the right and try to claw back some of the 6.8% of the vote that's gone to Restore? I think that's the only way forward. I don't think there's any point trying to appeal any more to the centre because you're just going to lose more of your core vote. I think they do need to become more right-wing, more hardcore, and basically just make the case on mathematics and say, this is all about mathematics. You either have the option of a left-wing Frankenstein coalition between Labour and the Greens, or you're going to have Reform and the Tories, which is going to mean a much more weak right-wing party, or you can have a majority Reform government. Those are the only choices here. Because Restore, as much as you may like them, will never get more than 10% of the vote. That's what all of the experts say, because on those only 10% of the country support those policies to the same level and degree. It's a hard reality check people need to get, but those are the questions Reform are going to be thinking about.
Interesting. Rafe, as ever, great to see you. Rafe Harder-Manku giving us his view on what happened last night. The by-election result, of course, is that Labour has kind of pretty much strengthened its position incredibly. It's hard to believe, actually, that Keir Starmer thinks that they've actually had a good result, because Keir Starmer is going to be out of a job because Andy Burnham has become the new MP for Makerfield, and because Andy Burnham is on a mission to get rid of Keir Starmer. It's been a very bizarre campaign. It's been a very weird kind of time, because at the end of the day, Keir Starmer, who said that he was going to actually go and even campaign on behalf of Andy Burnham in order for him to become successful and get the MP's job, in order for him to kick Keir Starmer out of office. So it's all a bit odd, really. But we'd love to hear from you in terms of what you think, particularly if you're a Reform voter, particularly if you would have voted Reform, and you will perhaps consider voting Restore now because of what happened last night. We shall see. This is, of course, the real home of Common Sense, is the Mike Graham Show. The protester last night was brilliant, says Sarah on the old Super Chat. Then the Hope was so funny. Andrew couldn't even speak from the heart. Looking down, it's embarrassing. I'm not sure, that doesn't make any sense to me.
No.
Who's Andrew? Which Andrew is she talking about? I don't know. Anyway, keep sending your Super Chats in. Obviously, we will push them right to the top of our agenda, and we will read them out. Coming up, we're going to be speaking to Joseph Robertson from, I think, CPAC. Is that right?
Yeah,
he's not here yet, but Ralph Schulhammer will be here. Philip Kisley will be here. Nigel Evans will be here. Adam Cherry will be here, who's been up in Makerfield. We'll talk to Bishop Kai Dura, of course, as well, and he'll give us a bit of a sermon for the weekend, and much, much more besides between now and 10 o'clock. And after 10 o'clock, of course, Russell Quirk will be here. You won't be, will he? No, it's Lembit Opik. We've had a fantastic week because we've launched UK News, UK Live online, which is full of the most wonderful shows. We've had Russell Quirk has been doing it from 10 till 12 rather, every single day. Today, Lembit Opik's filling in for him. He's only done 1 week. He's already taken Friday off, which is how that was allowed. And then, of course, Mark Littlewood looking into what's been going on in the football world as well, with his World Cup cuppa, as he calls it. We'll tell you more about that, and we'll play you a couple of clips from it as well, coming up very shortly. Should we do a bit of news?
Edward Hughes.
Is it Edward Hughes? Shouldn't it be Fiona McLeod today?
It should.
Where's Fiona?
I don't know. She's gone AWOL.
Fiona, for God's sake.
She was up all night watching Makerfield.
She wasn't with me.
She was up all night doing something else.
Oh, God. Oh, God, crikey. All right. So it's Edward Hughes with the news, apparently.
Yeah, a very smug Edward Hughes.
Yeah.
I think.
Morning, I'm Edward Hughes with your Friday Bulletin. Labour's Andy Burnham has decisively won the Makerfield by-election with a strong majority over Reform UK, clearing the path for a potential leadership challenge against Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The Conservatives achieved a historic breakthrough in Scotland, winning the Aberdeen South Westminster seat, their first such by-election victory north of the border in over 50 years. Economically, the Bank of England held interest rates steady, while new analysis highlighted Brexit's long-term drag on UK growth. Amber heat health alerts are active as forecasters predict temperatures rising above 30 degrees Celsius, with a potential heatwave this weekend. Tensions with Russia persist after reports of a Russian warship firing warning shots near a UK-registered yacht in the English Channel. Remember to like and subscribe. Laters, Tigers.
We're back. Edward Hughes there with the news on a Friday, which is unusual.
Yes.
Pooch tells me that we've got Edward because Fiona's gone AWOL, which is also not good. Things are falling apart, man.
Things are, yeah.
In the news department.
Well, no, Edward Hughes is day 5, sober.
Do you think he's feeling the pressure because of or they're feeling the pressure because of the fact that they've got to do more shows?
Maybe.
Because he used to finish at 10,
Yeah, well,
and now he's got to work. Now they've got to work till 1.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, I'm not happy about it. So we'll see what we can do. We've got a few other clips to play you over time. Before I speak to Mayor and Senthil Nathan, who is one of our favourite Hindu commentators, let's have a look at what John McDonnell said. This is the guy who, of course, was one of the chief lieutenants to Jeremy Corbyn when Jeremy Corbyn was in charge of Labour, and he's very much a sort of reconstructed Marxist. But he gets a bit sort of what can only be described as misty-eyed watching Andy Burnham and seeing what Andy Burnham's got to say for himself. Have a look at this. John McDonnell. Yeah.
Go to Mayor. Sorry, Mike.
We can't play the clip?
No, we'll have to go to Mayor.
All right. Okay. Well, we can't play the clip anyway. Maybe I'll get misty-eyed.
Yeah.
And just start weeping. Mayoran, good to see you, man. Good morning.
Good to be with you, Mike.
What do you make of it all this morning? Because my worry is that the Labour government is going to think that this is some kind of endorsement of what they've been doing, that Andy Burnham is suddenly now the new saviour of Britain, and he's going to parachute himself into Downing Street and go, look at me, I'm really, really nice and clever and different from Keir Starmer, and I can take you to all the places that you didn't know that you didn't want to go to.
Well, Andy Burnham's played the same game as Keir Starmer, and that he's just basically kept silent the whole time about what he thinks and who he is. And it's kind of just, he's kind of just gone with the momentum, and now he's found himself where he is. Now, my thing is, if only Keir Starmer had gone and campaigned with him, because then I think reform would have probably got in. And but because this was essentially an anti-Keir Starmer vote, whether it's Labour, whether it was a reform or restore, it's the same thing. But I mean, Ian McDonald, or John McDonnell, sorry, getting misty-eyed, as you put it, kind of emotional. I'm just kind of like, I'm wondering, they don't know what he thinks. What does he think about fiscal rules? What does he think about the EU? What does he think about the bond market? What does he think about defence and welfare? They don't know. Nobody knows. And so why are people getting misty-eyed about it? It's completely baffling to me, because this is a complete anomaly, a complete enigma who's coming into Parliament to apparently be Prime Minister.
Yeah, because they've got this kind of ridiculous idea that, it's all about the kind of the heritage, it's all about the story, it's all about this kind of, ludicrous idea that, politics is not really about facts, and it's actually about feelings, and it's actually about what you want to do and how you want to talk about how the country should be united and how the country should be, together, and how the country should be lovely and beautiful and everybody should have a rainbow lanyard. Unfortunately, the world isn't like that, is it? And it certainly isn't like that at the moment.
No, I mean, John McDonnell's reaction, just if I was Andy Burnham, I would start to be getting a little bit worried, because fundamentally John McDonnell's pretty hard left, and the hard left backbenchers are going to be looking at Andy Burnham saying, we want our pound of flesh, we want actual change, we want socialism. And then there he is going, I want to stick to the fiscal rules. And I think, actually the bond markets might be something we need to have a look at as well. How is he going to square the circle? How is the defence budget going to work? This is going to fall apart within hours of him becoming Prime Minister. So, look, I'm not excited. This is just vanity emotion from the Labour Party, nothing else.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, I find it really unfortunate in a way that Labour have managed to sort of, shoehorn themselves back into what they think is the public's favour, because they feel as though they've been endorsed now by the public, because Andy Burnham, I mean, to be fair to him, did get a big slice of the vote, in a place where maybe you would have expected that to happen. But it's a sort of endorsement that nobody would have expected, really, in the sense of Keir Starmer being such a useless Prime Minister. And it's almost as though they've sort of split the party. I was listening to a Labour MP this morning talking to Times Radio about how, it's a new beginning for Labour. We've sort of reinvented ourselves, and it's almost as though they've forgotten about Keir Starmer and all the crap that he's done and how useless he is. And they've suddenly gone, oh, don't worry, we've got another one over here. And here's your new Prime Minister, and here's your new, leader. And I find that all a bit sort of nauseous, really.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, I read Alistair Heath's column in The Telegraph, and he was kind of proposing that potentially Andy Burnham's going to have to call us some kind of general election in the near future. Now, some people say that's a bit far-fetched. After reading his column, it kind of makes sense because Andy Burnham, as soon as he gets in, he is going to be stained by the Labour Party and everything that they've done because he's going to have no wiggle room. He's going to have no actual mandate from the public, despite the vote that was happened last night. And so he's surrounded by backbenchers, like I said, who want to go hard socialist. The bond market's on the other side and fiscal rules on the other side as well. What's he going to do? He's going to get boxed in. And so he's going to need a fresh mandate, a fresh manifesto, a fresh understanding of what on earth he's going to do with the country. And you can really only do that and battle your backbenchers if you go to the public. And I think he's been willing to sacrifice a few backbenchers, maybe do a coalition with the Greens, Lib Dems, SNP or whatever it is, and just to see off the threat of reform, just to get a new mandate and actually govern the country properly. Because otherwise, he's going to be boxed in, within, like I said, within a few days of his premiership.
But isn't this a kind of a bit of a stain on our own democracy in a way? You know, I feel personally slighted, if you like, because I didn't ask for a new Prime Minister. I didn't ask for Andy Burnham to suddenly step up and take over the country. You know, I'd rather see a general election if that's what they want to do. And it seems as though, to me, they're kind of treating the electorate with scant regard. They're kind of going, you just put up with it. You know, we're going to now move in. You know, it's like the new people are in charge, and we've moved into Downing Street, and removal men have come in and got rid of the old people, and you're just going to have to suck it up. And I really object to that.
Look, I think it's high time now. I mean, Tommy Robinson on his United Kingdom march made a point, whether you think about Tommy Robinson, he made a point that everybody needs to get politically active if they want to change the country. And it's now, I think, when the public, when members of the
and
public,
look what happened after that,
or
right?
friends,
You
or
suddenly
your
got Andy Burnham. Now Andy Burnham took him at his word, and now Andy Burnham's going to be the Prime Minister.
Yeah, but look, we've all got friends and family who say, look, I don't really follow politics. It's not my thing. They're all the same and so on. Look, I get why people are exasperated and kind of disenfranchised from politics, but fundamentally, this is going to be the last chance. Whenever the general election comes, everyone needs to get politically active. It's as simple as that. That is the only way we're going to get rid of this kind of brand kind of politics, these kind of optics of Andy Burnham, northerner from the north, who's just a normal guy, you know, and that somehow makes him walking as Prime Minister. Otherwise, we're going to get amateur politician after amateur politician. We're going to go around in circles.
I know. I mean, I was going to say, well, the last thing we need is a guy that doesn't wear a proper shirt. But I noticed you're not wearing a proper shirt either. So I didn't want to pick on you for that. But you're not trying to be Prime Minister. But is there any chance he's going to put a proper bleeding shirt on if he's going to sit in Downing Street?
No, I can imagine him at the dispatch box with his black T-shirt and his black blazer and his black glasses, just playing the Northern card, because it's so good, isn't it? Because it's so, compared it to Keir Starmer, who is like I like to call it, the bureaucratic algorithm, and then you compare it to Andy Burnham. No matter what he says, as long as you've got a Northern accent, the eyelashes are being batted, you've got a black blazer and black T-shirt and black glasses, you're laughing. And I think that's half, at least 70% of the appeal of Andy Burnham that's gotten through this far.
Yeah, absolutely right. Because if you were to say to me, what do you think Andy Burnham actually stands for? I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question, because, there is that old joke, isn't there, that people trot out, and people have been trotting out since last night, where you get the, a Corbynista, a Blairite, a Brownista, and somebody who used to celebrate Ed Miliband walks into a pub, and the pub landlord says, "Hello, Andy, how are you?" Because that's what he is. I mean, he literally was part of every single Labour administration when they were in government. And when they were out of government, he was part of every single shadow administration as well. And when he says, well, the thing is that, people have been let down by their politicians over the course of the last sort of 30 or 40 years, he's been one of the people that's been letting them down. And he hasn't given anybody any reason to believe in anything that he thinks.
I mean, the biggest con he pulled off in this local election was to be the full-fat establishment politician who is now the kind of outsider, knight in shining armour, king of the north. Yeah. And I think that's largely because he spent a lot of time outside of Westminster. And it's also, and Nigel Farage made this point, it's because he was Greater Manchester mayor, and everyone thinks that's kind of politics. It isn't politics in the same way as being an MP, or certainly not a Prime Minister or cabinet minister, because it's really just a civic position where you kind of cut ribbons, you kind of grandstand with with photos at like different places, but you don't actually do anything. You just have you just waste taxpayers' money,
Yeah.
and people don't really notice. It's the reason why Boris Johnson was so popular before he got into Parliament as well. And so he's kind of riding off that. But like I said, it's all going to collapse. It's going to hit a brick wall pretty soon.
Yeah, I think so. Let me just ask you about a story that's on the front page of the Times today. 'Cause a lot of the papers obviously had, papers they had to put out before the general election or the by-election result was made public. Front page of the Times today, UK wastes billions paying too much for big projects. I mean, I could have probably told you that was going to be the case, but ministers are wasting £8 billion a year of taxpayers' money by paying over the odds for transport and energy infrastructure, analysis has found. Now, we keep being told that, we can't put any more money into defence because we can't figure out where to get it from. Al Khan's talking about taking it away from welfare. 8 billion quid a year being wasted by this government on projects which have got to do with largely transport effectively. But it's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, what is it about the public sector that makes them incapable of actually running anything without wasting money?
I think it's because anyone can spend any other people's money and not have to worry about it. There's that element. But it's also, we have to go back to Tony Blair. I mean, Tony Blair did the kind of magic trick of his time in government where he siphoned off democratic powers of parliament into quangocracies and the judicial system. And as a result of that, you have, National England, whatever it is, all these quangos coming in, talking about bat caves and everything else, and a hyper-regulated economy, a hyper-regulated country, which then increased costs. And so all of this is about fundamentally that we cannot streamline efficiently funds from minister to project because of quangos who are kind of specialists who are just one-trick ponies. I mean, we saw this during the COVID lockdown. If you have a quango, I can't remember the name of the quango, but just in charge of one thing, which is stopping a virus. Everything, all funds are siphoned in to stopping one virus and everything else goes to pot. And that's how government works. And that's why the public sector can't do anything. I mean, I was just trying to develop some properties the other day. I did so many valuations, soil surveys, and all these kind of regulatory procedures. By the time you finish all of them, it's kind of 1.5 years. And then the first one you've done is expired and you need to redo that again with extra costs. And that's how things work in government. That's just a microcosm of how everything works in this country.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, this country is so ridiculously inefficient in so many ways, particularly when it comes to the public sector, that you wonder how anything gets done at all.
No, I mean, look, I think we need to slash the state. We need to slash the bureaucracy. And this is why, I'm Danny Kruger, I think, from Reform UK, is doing some excellent work. He's written a white paper as well about how to kind of slash the civil service. The bureaucracy, we need the chainsaw, a melee chainsaw kind of situation to the government to kind of streamline things and make things actually work.
Yeah, absolutely right. Mayoran, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for spending some time with us. Mayoran Senthilathan there talking to us. Have I got that right? Is that a reasonable
Senthil Nathan, yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, Senthil Nation. Yeah, there you go. All right, good man. Good to see you. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend. It is Friday, so we are gearing ourselves up. We're off, by the way, tonight to a bit of a do, which is quite interesting. We've been invited as a group. And when I say we, I mean the Mike Graham show, the whole kind of, UK News Online, UK Live. What's it called?
UK Live.
I'm absolutely, I've literally had 1 hour's sleep. So, do bear with me if I make any mistakes. It won't be. You may have to take over. Yeah, can I go lie down on the floor? Because you know what happens, right? I went home. I was doing Dan Wootton's show last night. I finished at midnight. I said, look, I'm going to leave at midnight. And I managed to leave by about 2 minutes past midnight. And a lovely guy drove me home, and I got home, and I thought, this is good. Just before 1 o'clock, I'll be able to get about 4 hours sleep. And unfortunately, however, I was a bit buzzy because I knew that the count was going to be happening up at Makerfield, and I wanted to kind of know what was happening. And then the count came in from Aberdeen South, because that's another thing we should talk about. We've got these Scottish people on today. But quite a big deal. Kemi Badenoch and the Conservative Party have actually beaten into submission the SNP. Stephen Flynn, that was his old constituency in Aberdeen South, because he's now become an MSP in Scotland, right? But he got trounced, or the SNP got trounced, and he's not very happy about it. So that was one story. And as time went on, I thought, well, then they sort of flashed it up on TV that, you know, the result was imminent in Makerfield. So I was kind of watching it. Before I knew where I was, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. And I had to get up at 5. So I literally had 1 hour's sleep. It's basically what I've had. And I did have some sleep yesterday afternoon, which was good. So I don't want you to feel too sorry for me. And I don't actually want you to feel sorry for me at all. I'm just saying that, you know, I'm sitting here, and if I was to lean forward and close my eyes, I could literally fall asleep, just like that.
Don't.
What do you mean? Don't, she says. Charlotte's here. Anyway, but also what makes it worse, right, is that tonight we've got to go off to a place not in London, and I don't want to give it away because obviously the people who invited us don't want us to give it away. But we've been invited to a dinner, a do, basically, which is a sort of a posh do, which I don't do much of on a Friday normally. So I've got to go home this afternoon after we finish Plank of the Week and sleep for a couple of hours and then drive to this place, which is about an hour and a bit away. I mean, blimey. Anyway, John says this: I saw a little bit of Dan Wootton last night, Mike. Hats off for actually sitting next to that intolerable, screeching woman. Yeah, they pitched up with this woman who was from the Green Party, right? Can't remember her name, but there was a Muhammad in there somewhere. And my God, crikey. And she kept saying, I'd like to see the context of that. I said to her, well, what about Zach Polanski? Zach Polanski said, right, that he thinks that right-wing, because she said, we think that everybody should be treated equally. I said, well, Zach Polanski doesn't, because he said that right-wing people should not be part of society. And he was quite willing to basically sort of kick them out of society, you know, what you might call civilised society, and make them fend for themselves, i.e. they shouldn't be allowed to mix with other people. I was like, where'd you get that from? And she went, I haven't seen that. I'm like, well, that's what he said. He's quoted as saying it. And even Colin Tomlinson, who was there, actually agreed with me. Anyway.
Got the John McDonnell clip.
John McDonnell weeping. Have a look at this.
I will forever be grateful to the people here, the people of the wonderful places that make up this constituency, the proud places that always have deserved so much more. I will forever be grateful to them that they have given me the chance to go back and make this country work for Makerfield, and the many places like it across the country who have been neglected, who feel that the country works for other people in other places, but not for them. And that changes tonight. This result changes that. This result will bring about a country that works fairly for everywhere and for everybody.
I kind of feel like maybe you are emotional in a slightly different way tonight.
I certainly
You seem so.
I'm lifted by this. I think the whole Labour Party will be lifted by this because it shows we can not just defeat reform, we can trounce them. But we can only trounce them if we reflect on how Andy Burnham has done that, and he's offered hope and change. Keir has to recognise that actually I think it is time to move on, so let's plan it properly. Let's not divide the party. Let's try and do it with a bit of dignity and a bit of what we describe in the party as comradeship.
Sorry. I mean, should they be allowed to just sort of reset themselves and go, look, we know we made a massive balls up of everything up to now, right? We got in 2024, July, and we made a complete rick of everything. But it's okay now because now Andy Burnham's appeared and he's like Jesus Christ from Manchester. And he's going to come in and go, all right, everything all right? We're going to help you. We're going to help you out. We're going to raise you up. We're going to raise you up and help you to get better. Well, we were fine before you fucked it all up, sorry. You know? Bloody useless wankers. Anyway, Joseph Robertson's here. He might be able to help us to tell us what's going on with CPAC and a bunch of other stuff that's going on as well. I'm not convinced, Joseph, very good morning to you, that Andy Burnham is the answer, unless it's a very, very stupid question.
Look, he's had many different guises over the years, hasn't he? So who knows? Maybe he's able to take on yet another cloak of saviour, but I highly doubt it. You know, I think that the reality is he doesn't quite know what his own politics is, let alone being able to help the Labour Party find theirs at this point in time.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going to be very interesting to see straight away is whether or not the markets respond as we think they will, which is obviously to crash themselves out of despair because they think that he's going to be the leader, or if they're going to actually wait for his challenge, and see where it goes after that. Because I don't think they're going to have a lot of patience for more spending, which is probably what Andy's going to mean. And while he might preach a message of unity, what we really know is that the left, the traditional left of the party, the Corbynite left, is going to be licking their lips at a resurgence, because deep down, Burnham is a Corbynista.
Well, he is, and also, I've said to people this morning, as much as he may wish to change the world as he sees it, it's not really capable of being changed, because I'm looking at some figures that have just come out this morning. Jamie Jenkins has just sent me this. The UK borrowing surges again. The government borrowed 23.3 billion in May, which is a huge amount of money. I mean, up until relatively recently, it was kind of running around about 15 to 17 billion a month. We're now talking 23 billion plus, which is the second highest May on record, beaten only by May 2020, which was during COVID. So, whatever he thinks he wants to maybe do as he gets into power, he won't be able to do because he hasn't got any money.
Well, we were up to, 45% of GDP spent on the state. I imagine we're probably going to be creeping ever closer to 50%, if not already touching on that soon. So, I can't really see too many areas in which we outperform the USSR at this point. So we're trying to scrape our way out of a sinking ship with a teaspoon at this point. I mean, what really needs to happen is that we've got to have a reassessment of how many businesses have left the UK in the last year, how many wealthy people have left the UK in the last year. All of these are practical metrics for seeing how much tax dollar we can actually raise in time to pursue the fancy politics of Labour. And of course, the reality is Keir Starmer, for all his terrible faults, is actually not the worst option. And, this is something that the public has to wake up to. While he may be he is the worst Prime Minister we've ever had, I guess, but he's certainly not the most radical when you count in Blair. And, what we're going to see now is something that's a lot more radical. I think this is going to be a push of far quicker and escalating proportions than the Fabian mismanagement that we tend to see, because that is all about slow decline. It's all about slow, irreversible change. Andy Burnham will just be basically a hamster running around and not really thinking about what he's doing. And it's just going to be sporadic, bad decision making, but it'll be done with a smile and, of course, a different accent. So that's going to make all the difference, I think. And I really don't think the Labour Party has a core philosophy at the moment. It's quite worrying to look through their ranks. I mean, you can't say that it's one thing or another. Keir Starmer is kind of an enemy, and what he's going to do. It may be disgusting, but it's very predictable. Whereas I think Andy's coming in with a completely new idea of what he wants to do. It'll be interesting to see if there is still a more traditional left wing to the Labour Party that's going to follow him on this, because I think, while they may vote him in initially just to get any kind of change rather than what they have under Starmer, they're quickly going to realise that not all of them agree with old school socialism, because there's a lot of young MPs in that new intake. And I don't know how sort of whetted their appetites are for true radicalism.
True. And what does it mean for reform, do you think, what happened last night?
My personal opinion is that it's good. And I'd say that Burnham himself is going to be awful for us as a country. But the reality is it's going to show people up exactly how, polarized the choice is. This is no longer, let's say what we had a few months ago when Polanski was in ascendancy and there was all this talk of, 4-5 party system. This is just literally going to be a 2-horse race now. It's going to be very clarifying for a lot of people in terms of putting their money where their mouth is. And I think that for reform, it's going to be a good clarion call as to what the real enemy is. They've perhaps had to sort of lead from the front a lot of the time because there just hasn't been a challenge on the other side, and that can be very difficult. But I think this is going to push them into, a more unified kind of singular action point, which is between us and Burnham. It refines the narrative overnight, and I think that that's something actually quite, good for reform in the long term if they play it right. If they actually make sure that they're attacking everything Burnham does and not focusing on infighting on the right, because the reality is, as we saw last night, reform is the dominant force on the right. There is no Tory party, there is no insurgent challenge from third parties. So I mean that's basically how the narrative falls into place this morning. It's a 2-horse race all the way into number 10.
Although the Tories did okay in Scotland, funnily enough, winning that seat in Aberdeen South, which many people are suggesting means that Kemi Badenoch's finally got some good news that she can notch up on her bedpost, if you like, and say, well, look, we're not dead, we're still around, we're still able to win an election. Does it mean anything, or not really to you?
Look, I don't think it means too much. I think that Scotland is, again, having its own rarefying and unifying process going on. People are fed up and tired that the same old got back into charge in Scotland. And so, they're going to vote tactically against the SNP. They're going to vote tactically against the left up there in pockets where there's a right-wing vote. And if that means that there's more of a chance the Conservative candidate gets in, that's what they'll do. And the other important thing to note up in Scotland, of course, is that there was no Restore party. I mean, I found that very surprising. I thought Restore were going to be running everywhere, but apparently only where they can really try and nobble Nigel Farage. Of course, that didn't work. And as we've seen, and as our American brethren can see, now they are truly just a minority party. They got less than the BNP back in 2010. So again, I think what we're really looking at is, yes, perhaps there'll be pockets of Conservative resurgence, but it's due to tactical voting. Again, all of this is down to tactical voting. Last night we also saw zero pretty much Conservative vote down in the Makerfield by-election, and again that's because reform is the strongest choice. So I think we need to give more credit to the British public and to the voters. They're going to vote tactically wherever they see fit, and we also had to deal with the fact that the Greens were essentially moving for Labour really all the way through the Makerfield by-election.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? It looks like the Greens have kind of fallen away to some extent. I mean, we saw a poll this week which said that they've gone down to 9%. And I wonder whether some of that is due to the fact that Zach Polanski has kind of been exposed for being the charlatan that he is. And people are sort of starting to look at them and go, do you know what? Actually, they're not really standing for anything important, and they're really just a sort of spoiler party. And nobody really wants to see them in any kind of position of power because they're all so bonkers.
Well, the Greens are basically the new Lib Dems for me. I mean, their policies are worse even than the Lib Dems because the Lib Dems just don't have policies. But, the difference this time, I think, is that the British public are beginning to wake up to the idea of radicalism. And I think Gorton really had a lot to do with that. I think that Gorton really showed how their voting chain works and some of the bullying that was going on there on the day, which of course the police couldn't be bothered to look into despite saying that it was a real thing. I think that has woken up the public. Again, we just don't give enough credit to the public. They may not all vote the way we like, but they certainly rarefy their choices based on what they see. And you've got to go back to the various, well, certainly to the Brexit referendum when, again, the establishment thought that they were going to vote one way and they didn't. The reality is they don't get behind shock jock even movements very often. I mean, occasionally they do, but sport crumbles so quickly. We saw this with the SDP probably being the best example back in the 80s, of course, all the way up at 50% at one point in the vote share, and then totally crumbling away as soon as the public realised that there wasn't a unified leadership within the party. Some people can call the voter fickle, but I actually think that the vote is quite sensible. We tend to give people a chance, and we like to see people do well. But if they don't stand up to observation, then we're very often quick to fall away. Yeah,
interesting. Joseph, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Jeffrey Robertson there talking to us from CPAC about what happened last night at the Labour win over the situation in Makerfield, where Andy Burnham I mean, he actually won by a massive amount. I mean, that's the thing that I think surprised an awful lot of people. You know, the number of his exceptional kind of performance was so big that people were kind of thinking, has the Labour Party been reborn? Has Andy Burnham somehow, you know, turbocharged Labour to the point where people are going to look forward to now what he's going to do when he gets into Downing Street? I mean, don't forget, he hasn't actually got into Downing Street yet either. And in fact, somebody's just put a super chat in saying, there's no poll today. Yeah. Easy boy. There isn't a poll. Should we do one?
Yeah.
What should we do?
Think on the spot.
Eh?
Let's think of one.
We should think of one. Well, it should be something to do with Andy Burnham, shouldn't it? You know, what should Andy Burnham wear, perhaps, when he becomes the Prime Minister? I mean, I really don't even like thinking about the fact that he's going to become Prime Minister, because I think he shouldn't be able to become Prime Minister. But how about this, right? If he becomes Prime Minister, should he wear 1, a shirt and tie,
Yes.
2, a kilt, 3, a round neck, you know, New Order, you know, what do you call it? I don't even know what you call them. A T-shirt?
Yeah.
What,
Should a shell suit?
a dress?
Scouser, isn't it? Shell suit.
He is a bit... Is he a Scouser?
Yeah, people are correcting you because of your accent in the chat.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, let's do a poll based on what should Andy Burnham wear when he becomes the Prime Minister. I don't even like to think about it, to be honest. I don't, because I don't think he deserves to be Prime Minister. I don't see how there is any mechanism by which this man should be able to leave Parliament, right, having been an MP, having been what can only be described as a relatively unsuccessful minister and a relatively unsuccessful MP, didn't really achieve anything at all. Because I think if you did a poll and asked people what did Andy Burnham achieve when he was a minister, I don't think anybody would know, because he didn't really achieve anything, right? Oh, what's that?
It's gone. I'm putting the poll on, you see, so I have to go on the YouTube.
Oh, blimey. Anyway, so yeah, I feel very uneasy about the idea that somebody like Andy Burnham can decide he wants to become an MP, having been, you know, in a relatively high-profile position as a Manchester mayor of Manchester. He goes, I fancy being an MP, and then I fancy being Prime Minister. And the fact that he can sort of do that, I think is wrong.
Yes.
Totally wrong. I should probably be doing this as a bit of a meltdown, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
But we'll do a poll and we'll see what you think of it all. But I just find it very uncomfortable, shall we say. I just find it really uncomfortable that we will finally get rid of Keir Starmer, which obviously I'm happy about, because I don't like Keir Starmer. I don't want him to be running the country. I don't want him to be ruining the country any more than he's ruined it already. But I kind of don't want him to also be usurped, if you want, for want of a better word, by some bloke from Manchester who thinks it's his turn. It doesn't seem right to me. Does it to you? Anyway,
Ralph's here.
we've got Ralph. Twice in a week. Ralph Schulhammer. Ralph, a very good week, sir. How are you, man?
Twice in a week.
Listen, I'm getting a lot of grief this morning because I haven't had much sleep, because I was up last night watching the by-election in which Andy Burnham, who is a man that you may or may not have heard of, has won the right to be effectively the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And I feel like this is the sort of end result of the destruction of democracy in our country, because like many countries in Europe, it seems as though the elites have taken over and they're just messing around now and doing whatever they like. I mean, this guy basically was an MP. He served his time in various different governments. He's been a minister in the past. He left Westminster, went to become mayor of Manchester, you know, and is kind of pretending to be this kind of hail fellow, well met, you know, I'm from Manchester, I'm really a nice bloke, you know, I know how to run everything. And now he's decided he wants to be Prime Minister. So he's kicked a guy out who was already a minister, an MP. He's won the seat, and he's about to become, by default, effectively, the leader of Britain. It's incredible.
I mean, you can tell the abysmal state of British politics if you need to get an Austrian to comment on it, but I'll do it. I'll do it nonetheless.
Yes,
I mean,
please.
I've heard from my reliable British sources that another option might be Ed Miliband as the new prime minister. So
No, Miliband apparently wants to be the chancellor, so he will be in charge of the money, which will mean that he'll be able to guarantee for the rest of time that we will continue to pay ludicrous amounts of money for net zero.
Well, in his defense, he didn't accomplish net zero in the climate realm, but I'm pretty sure he can, achieve net zero in the financial realm when Britain finally runs out of money. So this is probably the point where he can achieve the zero. But in defense of the voters, the first time I came across the name Andy Burnham was when I did an interview with Rana Mitra, right, who did a lot on the grooming gang and the grooming gang scandals. And I don't want to say anything that would get us into legal troubles, but let's just say it's interesting what names pop up and the reluctance of certain people to investigate what Rupert Lowe, very much to his credit, has now finally done, regardless of whether the 250,000 number is too high or too low. The simple fact that it took, I think the issue came first up in 2013, so it took 13 years to finally get a politician come out with the real reports that also made public waves, not that was immediately put in a desk drawer somewhere. But in defense of the voters, I have to say, I think we are still in this awkward situation where I would say that 90%, fine, 70%, of the British public agree with almost everything, Mike, that you and I are saying here.
Yeah.
But I think there is still this hope that they say, Ralph, Mike, and others, they are correct. But I'm sure that the political class gets it. I'm sure that Labour gets it. I'm sure the Tories get it. So I will give them my vote one last time. I think there is still this hope. We see the same in continental Europe, that at some point, the quote-unquote traditional parties will just take over the program of the new parties, the alternative parties. And it's not going to happen. We are in this weird situation. We are like doctors, or the people they are like doctors, and they don't really want to tell the patient that you have to cut the leg off. They kind of still hope that you can somehow preserve it. So they continue to vote on occasion for the Tories, for Labour, in the hopes that they will execute policies as proposed by Restore and Reform. And I think this is the big dilemma. And why am I saying this? Just to immediately add on. If you look at polls, is Britain moving in the right direction? Is migration an issue? Should the small boats be stopped? I mean, in almost all these cases, you have a fairly solid majority. But when it comes to voting for political parties, it gets significantly more difficult. And even in the last larger election, Reform did not do as well as they were supposed to do. I think they did even slightly less well than they did in previous elections. But I think this is not because they got the wrong topics. There's just this clinging, and this is completely understandable, particularly for an older generation, this clinging to, that the wrong people at some point will do the right things. But I think this day is never going to come, and when it comes, it might be too late.
But this is the problem, isn't it, with and particularly for Reform, and I was speaking about this last night with Dan Wooden, is that, they've become, because they've had to become slightly more mainstream in order to sort of look like a likely candidate to be the government, they've had to kind of move away from being the rebellious party. They've had to move away from being, the noise at the end of the room that nobody wants to talk to, in order to be actually at the table. And once you do that, then you kind of give up part of that problem or part of that kind of, aspect that people liked about you. And so Restore have kind of filled that vacuum to some extent. And I don't know what you do about that, because I think, I personally believe that Reform have to be more mainstream in order to win the election, in order to become the government. But at the same time, you have to be careful not to lose part of what it was that you had that got you where you are, if you know what I mean.
Well, I think they should have some trust in the intelligence of the British people, which I think is remarkably high. And just tell them, listen, vote for us, give us a chance. If we fail, you vote us out. There is this sense that apparently British democracy is so weak. It is not. Like the British people are no fools. So I would argue, this would be when people ask me, so Ralph, if you would live in Britain, whom would you vote for? The reason why I say Reform or Restore is because I do know if they fail, then the British people can vote for somebody else a couple of years later. But I think it's also about sending a signal, or a punch in the face. I think the establishment, the mainstream parties, have to learn that they have overplayed their hand. The future cannot be just a continuation of a failing past. And again, this is the beauty about democracy. If the new movements should fail as well, they'll be voted out again. This is the trick of the mainstream, to pretend, oh my
Yes.
God, vote restore reform. It's you can never vote them out again. It's not a coup, it's an election.
Right. So, in your sense, looking at what happened last night, can you conclude anything from that in terms of reform and restore, or whether or not the Tories have had a sort of resurgence because they won a seat in Scotland over the SNP? I mean, what's your kind of take on it all?
I mean, I'm a little bit more, again, as an outsider who observes this, I'm a little bit more optimistic, because don't forget, Mike, I mean, you know this and your viewers as well, the British system, the political system, in many ways was designed to move slowly, to be stable. So I would say the kind of political change, the changes even at election that we have seen, the velocity of it for Great Britain is incredibly remarkable. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we are or you guys are where you should be, but I think we should not underestimate this. So I find this, if reform/restore, well, let's stick with reform for a second. If they don't win every election, every by-election, that means they have failed. No, building a new party, a new movement is a difficult process. I think that a figure like Nigel Farage, who has certain talents but is wanting in other areas, right? This is a huge challenge and very difficult. And this is always my critique with Farage. And I mean this with all due respect. He always had the problem of seeing things through. He's a little bit like the dog that catches the car. Think about Brexit. Great accomplishment. He got Britain out of the European Union. But he never then participated or said, okay, this was just a vote. Now we actually have to execute the exit from the European Union. And I always say to people when they say, oh, look at Brexit, that didn't work out. My question is always, well, did Brexit really happen? I mean, look at the legislation that has been passed in the UK over the last couple of years. I mean, the entire legislation was kind of an uber EU legislation. I sometimes jokingly say Great Britain became more like the European Union after it left the EU than while it was in the EU. I mean, take net zero, take migration, all these issues. In many ways, the UK has moved to the left, if we want to use that term, of the European Union.
It's to be a disruptor, isn't it? It's easier for him to be that guy who was in the European Parliament saying you're not laughing now and all of that, and like sticking two fingers up to Claude Juncker and what's his name, Verstappen, whatever his name was, and that was great. But now he's going to be part of a sort of established political organisation, which is got to have to come up with some proper policies and some proper ways of governing the country. And that's harder.
Oh, much so. And right, there's populism and there's policy. And by the way, those two things don't have to be in contradiction. But if you come to power on populist positions, you then have to execute them. So you need to prepare everything in the background. I think that's the biggest problem with Farage and other right-wingers. Geert Wilders in the Netherlands is similar. This means you need to accept very capable, very good people next to you without jealousy, without sabotaging them, without putting them down. I mean, for example, the whole split, I would argue, between reform and restore was at least in parts because of the behavior towards Rupert Lowe. Whatever one thinks about Rupert Lowe, but having a new political movement and immediately split it into two political movements, that is not smart policy. Whatever you think about it, that is just not smart policy.
No, I agree with that. And I mean, again, I had this conversation on Dan Wootton show last night that, Rupert Lowe's clearly quite a difficult character to get around. He's quite a, combative figure. He clearly doesn't work well with other people being in charge of him, which is understandable because he's come from a background of running things. But it's like when you talk about football, and we've got the World Cup going on at the moment, if you're the manager of the football team, it's up to you to make the football team work. It's up to you to take that, idiotic centre forward who, keeps shagging women and won't stop drinking, to make him play well and to get on with the goalkeeper, who's, you know what I mean?
No, Mike, your analogy is the perfect one. Think of the times of Manchester United during the era of Sir Alex Ferguson.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. You need somebody who is capable of managing those difficult characters, because very often, right, the most capable characters are also the most difficult characters. So what's true in football is also true in politics, and I think this is then the issue. Somebody like Nigel Farage has to decide: does he want to be a player, or does he want to be the guy who manages the exceptionally good players?
Yes.
And I think this is the decision. By the way, I think the same is true about Trump in the United States. The truly great statesman is the statesman who allows really, really good people to be in important positions.
Yes.
And this is very
And you might
often
not like them, by the way. You might not
absolutely,
like them.
yeah.
You might not get on with them. You might not want to go to the pub with them. But, you know that they are overall reasonably good people for your organisation to have inside the tent as opposed to outside.
Absolutely. And the big talent of the UK, the reason why Great Britain has been a great power for so long is because you guys had an exceptional talent for governing, for policy. Right? I mean, the people always talk about the British Empire, but nobody talks about, you know how difficult it is to manage a global empire? And given the technological possibilities of the day, the British did an exceptional job. We can have a separate debate about the moral of it, but simply being capable of doing it shows you that there was a knack, a very good idea of how to run a state, how to run a government. And I think this is something that got lost. This has to be rediscovered. And as you said, it's good to have disruptors in politics, but oh boy, the people have expectations. So at some point you have to meet those expectations. Or, as I said before, at some point the people will say, you know what, forget the entire political system.
Exactly right. And once you've lost them, you've lost them. I mean, it's hard enough for us here at the Mike Graham show to run the little empire we've got here, and everybody's really nice. There's no Rupert Lowe's here, as far as we know. But anyway, listen, we've got to run. Ralph, good to see you. Have a great weekend.
Mike.
Take it easy, because we've got Philip Kisley coming up as well. We've got Nigel Evans, who's in the studio, who's just arrived. Welcome, Mr. Evans. Good to see you. I've got lots to ask you about, particularly about Aberdeen South, which I think you'll be particularly pleased about. But let's talk to Philip Kisley, because I'd like to get his view on this whole idea of managing people who are a bit difficult and who can sometimes be tricky. Philip, I'm sure you've probably been accused of being tricky in the past, and possibly you've even had to deal with tricky business, because I think there are two conclusions, it seems to me, to draw from what happened last night, particularly in Makerfield, is that, the public have kind of fallen for Andy Burnham, which slightly disappoints me. And makes me feel, regretful that I was ever born.
Queasy is the word you're looking for, Mike. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But also, I'm interested in what you would say and what your take would be on the kind of the reform situation as well, because I think we all, I could be wrong here, but I think we all would like to see reform emerging as a proper political party that can do things when they want to, but I think it's a bit of a setback for them last night, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. It's obviously, it's a very disappointing morning. The sun's out, it's a beautiful day, but it's quite a depressing day, I think. But not wholly unexpected. You're talking about talent and managing talent. I think, it's great to be able to have talent, and it's great to be able to have difficult people, because difficult people often tend to be creative. They tend to be dynamic. They tend to think out of the box, and your skill, if you're managing them, if you like, if you're leading them, is making all of that stuff work for you. Okay. So Nigel Farage has had trouble with that in the past, obviously, but I think we've got the opposite problem here at the moment, and I think it's a lack of talent on the local level. I don't think the candidate was any good, to be honest, and that's not a slight against him. It's really difficult to articulate ideas on camera. It's really difficult if you have no experience of Westminster to understand what's going on. You have to survive in that jungle. Now, it's great to have people who aren't part of that bubble. It's brilliant, absolutely necessary to have people who have life experience, who run who understand what's going on in various areas of Britain and all of that kind of stuff. It's vital. But you also, as well as being ordinary, you also need to be extraordinary. And I think what reform needs to do is revisit that notion of what a local candidate looks like, because they really need to be on the ball. This is serious stuff, you know what I mean? They're up against the Labour machine, which is essentially presenting a new prime minister. You can't get big, and you need to have someone, the poor guy looked like you know, a dad dancing at the school disco at times, you
Mm.
know, and that's, and again, it's not, I'm not having a go at him. I'm having a go at the process that they thought he would be appropriate, I think.
Yes. But is it not also that dilemma that you face if you are reform, where you go, let's get somebody who is no longer associated with politics? I mean, don't forget, I mean, you know, Robert Kenyon actually ran in the election in 2024 and came second, you know. But if you're going to put him into such a high-profile kind of application for a job, if you like, in the Makerfield by-election, you want to make sure that he stands out as the local candidate. Whereas, unfortunately for him, when they announced that Andy Burnham was coming in, he sort of became the uber local candidate, even though I didn't really buy that. I mean, you know more about the area probably than I do. I was talking to Peter Barnes, whose mother lives there, you know, and he knows the area really well. And he said, you know, there's no doubt that people there are not going to fall for that kind of old trickery of, he's a local man, vote for him because he's local. When you've got Andy Burnham, who's clearly, you know, also a kind of local man, whether you like it or not, but he's a clearly much more qualified individual. And this idea that Reform have got this kind of slightly romantic notion that you can pick people out of you know, an identikit parade and say, would you like to be an MP? It doesn't really work.
No, it doesn't. And I think that's probably a good lesson that they've learned. Look, I mean, it's good that this has happened now and not in time, right? So I think we take that from it. It's also good, I think, that the narrative here isn't about a split vote between right-wing parties. It really isn't. It's just that Reform weren't good enough to take on Andy Burnham. That's a fairly straightforward and doable, simple problem. It's just that you need a better candidate. You need to be able to kind of navigate that ordinary, extraordinary dynamic that any particular candidate must have. Okay, there needs to be some kind of authenticity, but the way political parties are using and playing around this word authenticity is authentic, right? They're just using gimmick. So it needs to be about talent at the end of the day, and that's essentially what Reform used to be about. It used to be about finding the best people to take on the establishment. Now they're in a different situation. They are the establishment now. Essentially, they are, you know, the party that may well be the government in 2029, and that still stands. But what they need to do now is to be able to work as an establishment party. They need to be radical while appealing to the masses, and that is not an easy thing to do by any stretch of the imagination. But it is doable because people do want change. I think what's happened in this election, Mike, is that people have voted short term. They want Starmer out. So the quickest way, the easiest route to get Starmer out is to put Burnham in. But it also shows that they do not understand the long-term consequences of that. Tax and spend will take us into a recession that will make 2008 look like a stroll in the park. Seriously. Burnham is all about tax and spend. He's about sending us back into the EU. He's also about open borders. Now, we know that this stuff is catastrophic, and the polls tell us that people know. But they don't understand the depth, the complexity, and the detail. What Reform need to do is to be able to present candidates, present policy, and present themselves in terms of governance in a way that articulates that in a very clear, direct, and dynamic way. People do, in a way, need to be frightened into voting sensibly. And any vote for the Labour Party is just ridiculous, but people still don't know that. They still think, oh, well, you know, if we get them in, then they'll do something. They're not. They're not going to do anything different. They are married to tax and spend, and ultimately that will do for us.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that people voted Labour yesterday in Makerfield because they thought Andy Burnham's different? Andy Burnham's not Keir Starmer. We need to get rid of Keir Starmer. Because I can't understand anybody, having watched what's been going on for the last 2 years, actually thinking that a vote for Labour is any good at all.
Well, a vote for Labour just seems to be bloody stupid. But a vote for Andy Burnham as well. I mean, you've seen the guy. There is, he's a joke. I said
He's a cardboard cutout, isn't he?
Cardboard cutout. He's a cardboard cutout version of a cardboard cutout Keir Starmer. It's that, but he just wears kind of slightly more fashionable clothes. And again, we're down to this notion of people taking this more seriously. I think we do have a serious party in reform. They are serious about policy. If you do look at the detail of the policy, they are fairly radical. But what they need to be able to do is communicate that radicalism to a mass voter base who want it. It's the old cliche, isn't it? What we have here is a failure of communication. And politics is all about communication. It's about being able to articulate ideas. And what the candidate in Makerfield just simply couldn't do that. But it wasn't just his fault. The party as a whole have failed to do that. But the ideas are there. If we were having this conversation a year ago or 2 years ago, I would say, well, they've got no policy and there is no governance. I think they've worked quite hard on that. I think they do have policy now because they have some fairly big hitters in the stable there. James Orr, Matt Goodwin, all of those people. Whatever you think about Matt Goodwin, he's a clear he's a clear thinker. So they have all of that talent there. But what they need to be able to do, they need charismatic, dynamic people who need to present that message, give that message to the public and say, look, we are going to change things. But unfortunately, they're quite a long way away from that at the moment, Mike.
I think so. Philip, good to see you. We're slightly running late, so I'm going to let you go. But listen, have a great weekend. Good to talk to you as ever. Thank you very much indeed. Philip Kisley there, giving us his view on what is a very interesting kind of night, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, last night, and lots of things to discuss that have come out of it. Nigel Evans is with us, former Ribble Valley MP for the Tory party, and of course, former Deputy Speaker of the House. Very good morning to you, sir.
You still awake, Mike?
Just about. Just about. If you got some matches for me, that would be good.
By-elections tend to do that,
They do. And I'm not as young as I used to be. But isn't it funny? I mean, we say in this business, as we sit here and we produce shows and things like that, it's not as easy as it looks. And I think that the same thing applies to running a political party, because it seems as though Reform are probably waking up this morning and thinking, what do we do now? And I'm not dissing them. I'm not wishing to cast aspersions on them, but I think they got a bit of a bloody nose last night.
Yeah, and I want to be absolutely fair, right, as objective as I possibly can be.
Yes.
About what happened last night, and looking at it from the Reform point of view, because I had a mate up there in Makerfield. I've been there twice.
Right.
And I got a sense that it was a clear two-horse race.
Yeah.
There, everybody else was going to get squeezed, and they were.
Right.
And the big question was, could Reform? Well, how much damage was Restore going to do to Reform's
Yes, that was a big story,
and
wasn't it?
On the Saturday I was up there, Restore were claiming to have over 1,000 people there. Listen, if it wasn't 1,000, it was still several hundred, because I saw plenty of them delivering leaflets and canvassing. And they did dent Reform a bit, but it wasn't.
But not much.
It wasn't the difference. Just 3,000 votes.
Up until yesterday, I was very much of the opinion that there was an awful lot of smoke and mirrors going on.
Yeah.
I didn't think that Restore were going to be as big a force as they were saying they were going to be.
Yeah.
Because let's not forget, Rupert Lowe was telling people, we're going to shock everyone. We're going to give this massive, seismic effect to the electorate. You're not going to be prepared for it. And they were kind of hinting that they were running at maybe somewhere between 13 and 20% of the vote. And I never quite believed that.
No.
And so I was slightly, I don't crow about it, but I was slightly, happy that I was, when it turns out they got less than 7%.
Yeah.
That was kind of where I thought they would be.
That's right. The opinion poll said 7%, they got 6.8, so that's not far out.
Right.
But still, for them to get 7% of the vote was remarkable, considering you would think, if people were voting tactically, which a lot of people were, that you would have thought that people would have said, well, Restore ain't going to win, so let's go with Reform. But they wanted to send a clear message and that's why they voted Restore.
Yeah.
You know, it's as simple as that. And so,
and what's that message?
This was
what
a
is
victory.
the message?
This was an absolute victory for Andy Burnham.
Yeah.
Right, there were 3 by-elections that took place yesterday: 2 in Scotland and 1 in England. The Labour Party didn't just lose in Scotland; they were absolutely hammered. And the difference is the Burnham factor. Burnham stood in Makerfield with one intention, and that was to win the seat in order for him to come back to Westminster, in order for him to get 81 signatures to take on Keir Starmer. Last night, he served notice on Starmer to quit 10 Downing Street.
Yeah.
He's on his way. We've already got Labour MPs breaking ranks. Labour MPs I've never heard of saying, the time's up, read the room, it's time to go. And that's what this is.
I heard a guy this morning on Times Radio as I was driving in, and I can't remember his name for the life of me, but he was a Northern MP and speaking very, clearly about as if Keir Starmer didn't exist. It was incredible to listen to. He was sort of saying, well, it's great, isn't it, that Andy Burnham's now showing the real, force that Labour is, and he's going to bring change to the Labour Party, change the direction, and the interviewer was like, well, what about Keir Starmer? Well, never mind about that. And he just sort of didn't. It was almost as though he's been forgotten.
No, Keir Starmer's only alive to Steve Reid.
Yes.
That is it. Steve Reid is doing the morning rounds of the media.
He was always the one, wasn't he? He was always the one they pushed out.
Right.
Like, if all else is gone, if everything's failed, just put Steve Reid out.
Well, Steve is doing the morning rounds, and he clearly hasn't
He's
read
not coming here,
a
by the
newspaper.
way.
He hasn't listened to the radio, and he's not watched any TV today because things have seismically changed.
Yeah.
If yesterday before the result, Keir Starmer was dead man walking, today he's dead man.
Yes.
That is
But
simply
you're, having been Deputy Speaker of the House, you are intrinsically kind of connected to the traditions and the mores of democracy, if you like, in Parliament. Is it fair that this is how it ends for Starmer? I mean, for God's sake, don't think that I'm feeling sorry for him, but because I'm not, because I will be celebrating like the good one as soon as he walks out of Downing Street.
Mike, this is not a no-fault eviction.
No.
Right? It is not a no-fault.
No, it's not.
From day one,
Very true.
He turned on the pensioners.
Yes.
He was with his shopping trolley with Lord Ali getting all
Yeah.
his clothes.
Yeah.
And it just went from bad to worse
I
from then on.
I totally agree with you.
Letting down the waspy
and
women.
I'm very happy that he's no longer going to be Prime Minister very shortly.
Yeah.
However, I still feel slightly uneasy that this methodology, which has been invented literally in a by-election by Andy Burnham, who there was no by-election until he finally managed to convince Josh Simons to stand down. Apparently he tried 26 other places before he got there. But, it doesn't seem right to me that Andy Burnham can sort of waltz into Downing Street and declare himself to be Prime Minister without anybody in the public domain really actually voting for him to do that.
Whilst Andy Burnham will this weekend be on the phone, phoning Wes Streeting, Ed Miliband, Mahmood, you name it, doing deals. Keir Starmer will be on the phone to Wicks asking, can they send more sandbags around so that they can put them outside the door of number 10?
Right.
And if they sell tin hats, he'll get one of those too.
Yeah.
It's not a done deal that Andy Burnham will become the next Prime Minister. The done deal is that Starmer is now being served notice to quit.
Yes.
Right? It's as simple as that. If you look at the Aberdeen South by-election result and the Arbroath one, I mean, it is staggering. It's an absolute total collapse of the Labour vote.
Right.
That's Keir's legacy.
Yeah.
What happened in Makerfield was to try and help get Starmer out.
Yeah.
People were voting Burnham rather than voting Labour. They were voting Burnham to get Starmer out of number 10. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that Burnham is going to come down on Monday and be handed the keys to number 10. It looks to me, as I said, I made the joke about Wicks, but it does seem to me as if Starmer doesn't read the room and wants to stay exactly where he is.
Right.
John Healey, his name gets mentioned from time to time. Everybody likes him. He was a decent Secretary of State for Defence, and when he realised that we didn't have enough money to buy ships and tanks, that it was time for him to go. Now, he might have a following, Mike, and his name did get mentioned a couple of times by.
Well,
some
I've been told by
journalists
several people
Yeah.
in Westminster that both he and Al Carnes is a kind of a duo, if you like.
Yeah, they both went together.
I've got the 81 people who they're required to have if they want to run as a sort of an alternative leadership scenario. That may well be. Because timing is everything, isn't it?
Oh, the machinations of everything is going to be fascinating, right? Now, Wes Streeting said he had the 81 signatures.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure he ever did,
no.
right? Otherwise, he would have just presented them to Starmer and the process would have begun. Even if he does have 81 signatures, if you are one of those 81 MPs and you think, actually, Wes isn't going to win, I'd be on the phone to Wes this morning saying, could you take my name off that list, please? Because I'm going to give my signature now to John Healey or
I mean, in those
to Burnham.
circumstances, can you only give your signature to one party? So you have to remove it from there to put it over there?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, because, for example, with Keir Starmer, we've heard various different stories. I mean, one that I saw, I think, yesterday in the Times was that if Andy Burnham was to win the by-election, which he's now done, he will go to Downing Street. He will not say to Starmer that he wants to have a leadership election, but what he will want is for Starmer to admit that he's got to go and that he will have to sort of set out a timetable of departure, if you like. And then, and only then, will Andy Burnham be happy and he'll walk away and he won't cause any trouble. But who knows if that's the way it's going to go.
Good luck with that, Andy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if Wes does a deal with Burnham.
Right.
Or Healey, I don't know, whichever, and says, all right, listen, what job are you going to give me? And I'll settle with a compromise, right?
Yeah.
Particularly if he hasn't got the 81 signatures, you can dress it up as, very conciliatory.
Yeah.
The stark evidence, right, is that this morning, Kemi will be travelling to Scotland to stand next to Douglas, her new Member of Parliament for Aberdeen South.
Yes.
Keir Starmer will not be travelling to Makerfield to stand next to Andy Burnham.
No.
It would be hitman and victim
Well, do you
in the
remember
same shot.
there was a moment, wasn't there, 2 weeks ago, I think, where Starmer apparently, presumably having woken up in a state of delirium, decided to say that he was going to go and campaign on Andy Burnham's behalf to get himself out of his own job. And you kind of went, sorry?
That's right.
Why would you do that? And then, of course, you U-turned on that as well.
Yes,
and
flip-flopped on that.
Flip-flopped on it and didn't campaign for Andy Burnham. But, I mean, again, I just feel as though, as a nation and as a voter and as a member of society, this is not the way to run a bleeding country, is it?
Well,
this is not what they should be doing.
Let's look at it constitutionally. The person who is Prime Minister is the person who has the confidence of the House of Commons.
Yes.
That's how it technically works. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that now Andy Burnham will turn up in Downing Street on Monday and be handed the keys. That's not how it works. He will need to get 81 signatures. He will, and it looks to me, because Starmer, unless he flip-flops on this too, and he's got form, so he just might, you never know, he might try and do a deal with Andy and make me foreign secretary. He likes travel, we know that.
Yeah.
So you just never know. I mean, it is quite remarkable, and it was a significant victory. The one factor, and I can't remember if I told you, Mike, that when I went canvassing last Saturday, I came across Tories voting for Burnham to stop reform. And when I tweeted that, a couple of reform people who I saw at Michael Ashcroft's book launch the other day had a go at me saying, what was that mischievous tweet? And I said, well, it's what I found on the doorstep. There were people there who were otherwise Tories, who knew that the otherwise excellent Michael Winstanley, the Tory candidate, was going to get hammered.
Who was actually a really interesting character, because he emerged from that question time debate as probably the guy who was the most sensible person there.
I came across a ton of people who said he was great on question time. I met one man who was in the audience, and he said, oh, no, he was brilliant, but I can't vote for him. You wouldn't tell me who he was voting for, that guy. But he said, I'm going to vote tactically, and that's exactly what was going on. So, if you are one of the 400 and odd Labour MPs now, and particularly if you won your seat at the last election, like Ribble Valley and the seat next door, never been Labour, Ribble Valley has never been Labour, right? She won by 800. If she wants to win even stand a chance of winning the next general election, what are you going to do? You can't stick with Starmer because he's already proven himself to be so toxic.
Yeah.
Just look at the Scottish results, how bad they were. I mean, they were colossally bad. They were appallingly bad. So you were going to go, right, who is it?
Will he not blame Anna Sawar for that, though? Will he not say, what's nothing to do with me? Because that's Scotland.
Anna Sawar read the room before anybody else.
Yeah.
He could see what was happening.
Yeah, well, he was the one that called for
Mike, he
Starmer
could smell
to
the
leave,
coffee.
yeah.
You know, it's a shame that others didn't follow. And this is the other interesting thing that I've been reading about recently and talking to some Labour MPs this week, which is that you might have some resignations. If Starmer decides to take that delivery of sandbags from Wicks, then you might get Ed Miliband going, it's game over.
Yeah.
If you believe in death with dignity, we already know that because you supported the private members bill, but clearly not in your case. Yeah.
Well,
not in your
Miliband, apparently, again, only yesterday, Miliband was threatening to resign next week.
Yes.
In order to sort of trigger
Yes. And it might happen.
departure.
No, it might happen. No,
Might happen.
No, it might happen if it looks to me as if this phone call, and I don't know whether. I mean, you saw the tweet that Keir Starmer put out, did you?
Which one?
After the victory last night.
No, actually, I haven't
normally
checked, no.
it would be wonderful. It was a 2-line thing,
right?
Congratulating Andy and then saying, "Wonderful that we got hope instead of division and hate." I mean, it was so.
It's so weird, isn't it? But it's a bit
what's
like
the other joke,
but he
Mike,
said
is
the
he
other
offered
day,
him a job.
When he said the other day, you know, I'd like him to have a major role in my cabinet, and I thought to myself, and I said it, you know, yesterday or the day before. Well, sorry, mate, it might be the other way round. You know, he may be forming a cabinet himself, of which you may or may not be a part. Probably not.
It demonstrated to me how out of touch Keir Starmer is. It's quite alarming, quite frankly.
I know.
That he would be so prepared to humiliate himself, which is what he's done, by saying, I'm going to offer him a top job. There's only one top job Burnham wants. That's the only reason why he fought the by-election, the only reason he's quitting as Mayor of Manchester, and it is to be Prime Minister of this country.
Right.
He doesn't want to be Chancellor of the Exchequer or Foreign Secretary. No. He wants to be Prime Minister. And you wouldn't want to be a Foreign Secretary under Keir Starmer. You wouldn't.
No.
Because the toxicity will still continue.
Well, I mean, I think people look at Keir Starmer now and look at and see a kind of Jonah figure, you know, who just everything he touches just turns to absolute crap, you know. And he went to the G7 this week, and it was sort of embarrassing because you thought, what are you even doing there? And even his mates, you know, Macron, Merz, and Trump, clearly, you know, certainly didn't have much to say to him at all. But they're all kind of looking at him going, why are you even here? Because we know you're not going to be here for the next G7. We know that you can't enact anything because nobody believes a word you say. And you're a kind of busted flush. And you know better than anybody, once you've kind of lost the confidence of the room politically, nobody wants to talk to you.
Yeah, you saw that photograph of the empty chair because he was late to one of the meetings.
What a brilliant picture, though.
I think that was an indicator.
What a brilliant picture.
Only made worse by the time he did turn up, and Trump was ignoring him. He was sitting next to him, and Trump was, you know, looking at the sun or whatever it was. He didn't. All of these leaders will have ambassadors in this country who will be feeding them what the political situation is like around Europe, around the world. Right. And in Britain, they will be saying, this is the situation in the United Kingdom. Keir Starmer will not be Prime Minister shortly.
No.
There is a man, it's another debate, Mike, whether Andy Burnham is the saviour or not. You can put that to one side. It doesn't really matter, even if he's worse than Starmer. The reality is Starmer is toxic, and Burnham sees himself as the new Messiah who's coming, the King of the North, coming down to do some of the things that he did in Manchester writ large. And for a lot of Labour MPs, looking at their seats, looking at their jobs, they rather like the green benches and all that sort of stuff. They are going to think, right, that's it. We've got to get rid of Starmer. And this is going to be a fascinating next few days.
I was going to say, so what's your best sort of guess as to when Starmer actually physically walks away and comes out? And how does he do it? Does he come out in the same way that Boris did, put the lectern out, and the hot guy comes out and puts the lecture,
Yeah,
and all the women
that,
go,
yeah.
"Oh, there he is, there he is." Can you mind taking some clothes off while you do it? And does he come out and announce it? Does he go out the back door? What does he do?
No, Larry the cat will be going, "Oh, here we go again." It looks to me, everything he said is he is going to look to do some sort of deal to stay. Right?
Yeah.
That's where he sees it. He's not on the same
For
planet as the rest of us.
For a little while.
Yeah. Well, right. His number one thing, right? Now that Burnham's the MP for Makerfield, he has to resign as the mayor of Manchester.
Yes.
There's going to be a by-election.
Right.
So Starmer's already said this is no time to be focusing on leadership
for
at
God's
elections.
sake.
We need to focus on winning the Manchester.
Yeah.
I think if you're not careful, if you take that line, just as Makerfield was a referendum on Starmer and getting rid of him, if Starmer's still there and there's no intention of him going with, this is the timetable, then the Manchester by-election will be another referendum. And they've only got one Andy Burnham, and he's resigning from that job.
And does reform then come on? Because I had Richard Tyson here the other day, and it was clear to me at that point that they'd he didn't say it in as many words, but they'd sort of abandoned all hope, as it were, when Makerfield was concerned, because it sounded to me as though they knew they weren't going to win it, right? A bit like Gorton and Denton when they put Matt Goodwin in, and I think they worked out pretty quickly that he was the wrong guy to put in, and they weren't going to win that either. So he was kind of trying to convince me that Manchester and the mayoralty of Manchester was a more important role for a reform sort of victory. And so if, for example, reform was able to get their candidate, and I said, "Who have you got in mind?" And he said,
"Which plumber have you got now?"
Yeah, well, he said, "I'm not telling you." He said, "We've got a very good candidate." I said, "All right, fine." So they've obviously picked somebody. If reform was to win that, would that boost reform perhaps better and more than if they'd won against Andy Burnham?
Yeah, probably. Listen, whilst they did, they got a bit of a bloody nose yesterday, and particularly in Scotland where they got fewer votes.
Yeah, because we'll come on to that in a minute.
They were squeezed.
Yeah,
they were absolutely squeezed. So they are where they are now. They still got 35% of the vote there, right? But it was still a wide margin between the victory, and it dawned on me when I saw all the.
It was like 9,000, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a massive victory. It's a personal
big
victory.
Number. Yeah,
a personal victory. I got the sense when I was knocking on doors that Burnham was going to win by a bigger margin than they were letting on.
Right.
I mean, a lot of political parties during by-elections try and spin that it's tight in order to get their own vote out.
Yes.
I thought it would be big. I didn't think it was going to be as big as he just got just shy of 55% of the total vote there.
Yeah.
And more people voted in that by-election than voted in the general election 2 years earlier. So these are significant. These are significant statistics.
Yeah.
Now, the war is over, and I think what they are for reform, and so what they've got to do is move on. They've got to move on. They've got to look at the Manchester mayoralty.
Yes.
And that's what they've got to put all their focus on. But the real problem is, Mike, in the fractionalised nature of British politics today, when parties are polling 26%, 20%, 19%, 80%, I think Andrew Neil referred to it as the next election could be a bit of a crap game. You throw the dice and you see what falls and how it falls. It's a real fractionalised picture.
Because are we now in a 5-party state system, if you like, rather than a 2-party state system?
Well, Keir Starmer won the general election on a third of the votes.
Yeah.
Forget the majority. We know that he's got a huge majority, but it's totally grotesquely distorted because of the 2-party voting system, first past the post.
Yeah.
That's why he's done as well as he did. The next, the mayoralty by-election, which is going to be the next one, I think it's got to be done by the 6th of August,
Something like that, yeah.
It's actually in law when it's got to be. You could see the winner of that winning by 30%, 31%, 32%.
Yeah.
It's going to be absolutely fascinating. And it's pointless looking at, from what I've seen, local election results to say this is the indicator as to what's going to happen.
They seem to be further apart than ever.
Makerfield, reform mopped up around the Wigan area, and yet still failed to take what must have been what they thought was in the bag.
Yes.
Before the by-election. I don't know, Mike. Listen, there's going to be a huge post-mortem on this. The candidate clearly had a bit of history as far as social media is concerned. That got mentioned time and time again, and I think that might have cost them. Now, had they had somebody who didn't have a history of interesting tweets, then would Reform have been in a stronger position to have won? It's a big question mark.
I mean, I wonder if they couldn't ever have won against Andy Burnham because of whatever reason, and the Tories have been good at this as well over time. You've got a machine, and sometimes the machine
massive.
is too big. I mean, it's like Sadiq Khan's machine. You know, I don't meet anybody in London that's ever voted for Sadiq Khan, and yet he keeps winning elections because they've got this amazing machine.
Yeah.
You know, in the same way that I think perhaps Andy Burnham had in Makerfield. But let me ask you finally, before I let you go, on the subject of Aberdeen South.
Yes.
Because some people are saying to me, this shows that Kemi Badenoch is not dead and buried, that the Tories are not dead and buried, that there's still plenty of life in the old dog yet, as it were, and maybe this is a bit of a resurgence.
Yeah, but the Tories also won some local government by-elections yesterday too, in England and in Wales. There was a seat in Mumbles, which the Tories gained.
Okay.
And the significant one definitely was Aberdeen South. Of the 3 by-elections yesterday, only one was a gain.
Yeah.
Only one was a flip, and that was Aberdeen South for the Tories.
Yeah.
They went from 3rd place to
And
1st.
quite a big gain, because I think
It's a huge
Stephen
gain,
Flynn
6,000 majority.
Yeah, I was going to say, Stephen Flynn had, what, 3.5 or 4,000 majority?
That's right. No, and the Tories were in 3rd place.
Yeah.
What happened? Kemi came in with drill, baby, drill.
Yeah.
What's the most important industry in Aberdeen, Mike? It's oil and gas.
Yeah.
And
it's not rocket science, is it?
Both the SNP and the Labour Party have said, no, we're not going to exploit this natural.
Yes.
We'd rather buy it off Russia.
Right.
I mean, seriously, it's just how bonkers it is.
Yeah.
And so it gave an opportunity for the Tory party in Aberdeen South to say, we actually believe in drilling the North Sea. It's billions of pounds worth of natural reserves. We don't need to be importing it from Norway, who are actually exploiting the same fields,
seabed, effectively.
No, it is absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
And so I think Aberdeen South was absolutely significant, as I said. But also have a look at the local government by-elections yesterday as well. The Tories have started to win. So I thought that there was an existential threat to the Tory party after the general election.
Yeah.
Rishi's brain-dead
Is this a
decision
bit of a comeback
to hold
then,
it early.
do you think?
Kemi is the difference. The Kemi factor is a little bit like the Andy factor in Makerfield. Even people in Makerfield who say, listen, I'm a Tory, Nigel, I'm not going to vote Tory this time, even though I think Win Stanley's a good guy, but I like Kemi, I like what she's saying. And I wouldn't be surprised if the next set of opinion polls start to reflect that more clearly, that the Tories are going up, Reform is flatlining or slightly going down, but the Labour Party with Starmer are absolutely collapsing.
Yeah, interesting. And that's why it's all kind of to cock in a way, if you'll pardon the expression.
No, Labour MPs will be panicking.
Because Burnham's won this massive majority in Makerfield, and it doesn't seem right. It doesn't make any sense. But Nigel, listen, great to see you.
Yep.
Lovely to have you on the
Great
show.
morning to be chatting politics.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is absolutely seismic. The Ribble Valley by-election, which I fought in 91, was famous because it was the 13th safest Tory seat, and I lost it.
Right.
The poll tax was dead. The Makerfield by-election, seismic in history, because now Keir Starmer is politically dead. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
By-elections tend to do these things.
It's weird, isn't it? You know, Labour win, but the Labour Prime Minister's out. You kind of go, what? How does that work? Anyway, listen, great to see you. Nigel, thank you very much indeed. We're going to speak to Adam Cherry very shortly from Guido Fawkes, because he's been up in Makerfield talking to people up there as to how and why they voted the way that they did. But should we do a bit of news first? With Edward Hughes, who's working on a Friday for a change.
Good morning, I'm Edward Hughes with your Friday Bulletin. Labour's Andy Burnham has decisively won the Makerfield by-election with a strong majority over Reform UK, clearing the path for a potential leadership challenge against Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The Conservatives achieved a historic breakthrough in Scotland, winning the Aberdeen South Westminster seat. their first such by-election victory north of the border in over 50 years. Economically, the Bank of England held interest rates steady, while new analysis highlighted Brexit's long-term drag on UK growth. Amber heat health alerts are active as forecasters predict temperatures rising above 30 degrees Celsius. With a potential heat wave this weekend, tensions with Russia persist after reports of a Russian warship firing warning shots near a UK-registered yacht in the English Channel. Remember to like and subscribe. Laters, Tigers.
Thank you very much, Edward Hughes. We've got a poll going because we didn't have one earlier, and so we made one up basically on the hoof. What should Andy Burnham wear when he becomes Prime Minister? A shirt and tie? Should he wear a kilt, a shell suit, or dungarees? I like that. That's very good.
Like that.
There you go. You've done him up. Oh God. You know, people have said he's not a Scouser, by the way. That he grew up in Cheshire. He was born in Aintree, apparently, which would technically make him a Scouser. He looks like Kevin Keegan in that picture. That's quite funny. So what's
that one?
I know that. Yeah, see, look how much better he looks on the right-hand side there with a suit and a tie. That's how he should look. If you're going to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, wear a bleeding suit. Exactly. That's what I think. Pooch is agreeing with me.
What about kilt?
How's it going in there on UK Live, by the way?
It's going really well.
UK Live online. Don't forget, after this show at 10 o'clock, today, it's not Russell Quirk, it's Lembit Opik who's sitting in for him. I said to Russell yesterday, because I saw him last night, actually, he was at Dan Wood's, I said, what, have you become the Julia Hartley-Brewer of UK Live? You only work Monday to Thursday.
No, crazy, eh?
You don't work Fridays. Unbelievable. Anyway, so let's throw the poll up again. Sorry, because I didn't see what was winning. Shell suit. Yeah, okay then. Let's talk to Adam Cherry from Guido Fawkes because he's a good man and he's been up in Makerfield doing a bit of research over the course of the last few days, I'm sure. He can possibly tell us, my goodness me, you're very large in the...
Christ.
Crikey. Adam, how are you, man?
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah, I'm very good. I'm very good.
Excellent.
Yeah, sorry to stun everyone.
No, don't worry. I don't know if you were able to hear what Nigel Evans was saying there, but it's a very odd situation, isn't it? Where, you know, Andy Burnham wins a famous victory in Makerfield, which was, I suppose, not unexpected. But I think the margin of victory was bigger than everybody thought. But Labour are kind of finished. Labour is screwed, and yet Labour have won.
Well, they're certainly screwed with Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
All these Labour MPs will point to the margin of victory, which you're right, I was surprised by as well. And they'll say, well, look at what Andy Burnham can do in a seat that Reform hoped would be an upset for them. And don't forget, in the May elections on May the 7th, Reform got 24 out of 25 of those wards. So to put that into context, what Burnham has done is massive. And when I was in Makerfield, I thought he would win, but not by this margin. There was certainly a lot of support for Reform, just on the ground, talking to people, a lot of signage. But also equally, there were some undecideds. This was over a week ago now, so they still had some road to run, and obviously it's worked in Andy Burnham's favour in a big way.
Yeah, because I was talking to Richard Tice a couple of days ago, and he was sort of still quite upbeat, saying there's a lot of undecideds, as if and he said also we're expecting a lot of people to come out and vote who haven't voted much before. And I said, does that mean that's a restore vote? And he said, no. He said, I think the undecideds and those who haven't voted before actually might vote for us. And I mean, Reform's vote wasn't small, but it just wasn't enough, was it?
Yeah, I mean, the dynamics of this by-election, obviously slightly very different. Yeah. Everyone there knew what they were really doing. They knew that voting for Burnham was a vote to boot Starmer out, to do it very quickly. So that explains some of the results here, or the main result, in fact. But you saw, I don't know if you saw the video that Nigel Farage put out this morning, and he said that, of course, they're disappointed to come second, well, duh, but also that they thought they'd get 18,000 votes, and I think they got, 15, 16. So they actually underperformed their own internal expectations as well. So, all eyes now on the mayoralty, as you've been discussing over the last couple of minutes. Who's the Reform candidate? Who's the Labour candidate? Actually, I think that's a really interesting one to analyse. Everyone will be distracted by the changes in number 10, which are coming. Obviously, we'll know probably on Monday how soon that'll be. But the Manchester mayoralty is still up for grabs, and we'll have to travel back up to the area again on the train and start making more videos up there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, Richard Tice was a bit sort of reluctant to name the candidate that they'd chosen, but they'd clearly chosen a candidate. I don't know whether you've heard anything along those lines as to who they might put up.
No, I mean they keep their cards pretty close to their chest. No one knew that Matt Goodwin was going to be the candidate before Gordon Denton and then Rob Kenyon this time. So it's a very, very close shop over there. But they'll have to move pretty quickly. And like you said, it sounds like they've already chosen their man or woman. So we'll find out pretty soon.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, in terms of how reform move from this point on, Nigel Evans was saying that they've had a bit of a bloody nose. There's no question about that, because they started the campaign kind of saying this is the biggest by-election of all time. We're going to get, vote reform, get Starmer out kind of thing. Whereas it turns out actually it's vote Labour and get Starmer out, which is kind of curious. You know what I mean? So I'm not quite sure if you're Nigel Farage this morning, you can't be happy, can you? No, you're not.
I think he says that again, it's worth watching the video he put out this morning, because he acknowledges this, and they said on May the 7th, vote reform, get Starmer out. That's exactly what is going to happen. It will happen by early next week. He's going to set out that timetable. That's already in motion behind the scenes. But it's not to the benefit of reform, because they've found someone else who actually voted quite like. For now, obviously things can change. I mean, what does Andy Burnham think about defence or Ukraine?
Well, we don't know.
How's he going to solve all that? We don't know. No one knows any of this. So at the moment, there is a honeymoon period. He's got this kind of patina of northern lads done good kind of thing going on. But once he gets to Westminster and he is shackled by the manifesto that he didn't even write and wasn't even in Parliament for its creation, what's the difference other than he's a little bit slicker? So very quickly, I think he'll have to. I'd say there's certainly going to be pressure for an earlier general election, and we've been saying this for some time. I know he's ruling this out, but when I say earlier, I don't mean tomorrow. I do think within the next 18 months there'll be pressure to do that, because he's claiming his own mandate, and he's going to want to borrow more. He doesn't mind getting the checkbook out. Certainly, that's what he said in the last year or two. So I think we're in for more chaos, to be honest.
Yes, and it might well be, as you say, that they go a little bit early on the election front, on the basis that reform won't be ready, or reform won't have enough decent people to put into every single constituency that they want to put them into.
Yeah, reform. So you need cap reform, and they've already got the evidence on the ground, as Burnham is already saying, that they can beat reform in their heartlands. That is the argument for Burnham's entire political existence at the moment. It's not his policy ideas, because, like I said, we don't know what they are. But all the Labour MPs over the next couple of days are going to start to mobilise. They're all worried about. Nigel was saying earlier, right? It's a very, very shallow majority that Labour won in 2024. So there are all these Labour MPs who are thinking they're going to lose their seats for sure under Starmer or whoever else. Streeting, he's going to lose his own seat. Their only answer is Burnham, regardless of whatever his politics are or aren't. He kind of has, and many people are saying this, I think it's true, he kind of has the mayoral king over the water spark that Boris Johnson had. Of course, Boris was briefly foreign secretary as well, but he had this outsider appeal, and the only guy who could unite his side of politics. Boris on the right, this time, of course, the progressives. So that's what we face, Michael. I think we will be. I think we'll be next 2 years. We're in for a hell of a ride. It's going to be a lot of fun, but also complete chaos.
As we're in the middle of the World Cup, is there any kind of football dividend that Burnham can grasp and hang on to over the course of the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, maybe. If he gets in, maybe he should call this election and say we're going to go 5 days time. We're going to have this election on the day of the England versus Panama game or something. See how that goes.
Right. Because England could win that one 4-0, and then there'll be the feel-good factor, and we could all go, isn't it great to be English, even though in places like Oxfordshire and Bristol, you're not allowed to fly an England flag, otherwise you'll be arrested.
I know. Although I have to say, Burnham, he's quite savvy, because on that sort of stuff, the kind of woke culture warsy stuff, he's smart enough to know that the general public don't tolerate this stuff anymore. They're not bothered by it. Okay, you get pockets of nonsense like Bristol and whatever, but they're always like that. So at the very least, he can navigate that relatively well. Certainly he's more agile in that respect than Starmer is. But we'll see.
So Nigel and I were talking about it, and as you probably heard, in terms of the actual timetable of the Starmer departure and how it's going to be done. How do you think it's going to be done? Will he put the old lectern out front, and the hot guy comes out, and all the women, get weak at the knees and go, "Oh, isn't it great? It's lovely," And he comes out and because I think that he's. I think we're all slightly puzzled by Keir Starmer's kind of demeanour. I can't quite work him out. I don't know, because if it was me and people hated me that much, I would be kind of after a while you'd kind of go, I'm not actually going to go to the G7 because it's a bit embarrassing. I'm not really going to walk into Downing Street in the front door. I'm going to go around the back. I'm not really going to go and stand in Parliament because everybody thinks I'm an idiot. But he seems to be oblivious to all that.
Well, I think when you're in the bunker, so two things. First of all, Starmer's political antennae are weak in the first place. He's never particularly been in touch with his MPs or the electorate, right? We know this, but this is obvious. But also, when you're in the bunker and the fog of war, it's very difficult, I think, because you got Morgan McSweeney in your ear. He's back trying to,
and he's still talking to him, right? He's still advising him.
Yeah. We did a story a couple of weeks ago on. We had a picture of Morgan schmoozing some senior journalists in central London, in Westminster. So he's been back for some time. He barely ever left. He walked out and then walked back in again, effectively. And he's the one telling him to fight on. There are a couple of others. Steve Reed, you'll see on the media round this morning, saying there's a contest hasn't been triggered yet. Well, obviously, Burnham only just won about 10 minutes ago. So over the next couple of days. It's already happening, by the way. There's a trickle of those Labour MPs coming out publicly, but it's much more. There's a much deeper operation behind the scenes. This is all carefully choreographed. He already has the nominations, and Burnham, that is. He already has the signatures to prove to Starmer that, look, if you're not going to go, I can force you out here. You are going to lose. There's no way on earth that Starmer defeats Burnham in a head-to-head. And why drag the party and I suppose the country through the blood and gore of all of that chaos that we saw under Boris Johnson in the dying days of his government. So with that in mind, he will come to him on Monday and say, okay, let's agree to a noble departure for you. And I know Starmer's saying publicly he's going to fight on and on and on, but they always say that. I would imagine that he'll have to just go, and he won't even bother fighting it all the way through the summer, because it'll just be embarrassing for him. And even he, I think, will eventually see that the writing is on the wall, because the majority that Burnham won here is huge. It's totally undeniable. And if your central mission, as Starmer says, effectively, he has a lot of missions, but one of them these days is fight the existential threat of reform. Well, the only person who has proven that he can do that effectively is Andy Burnham. So he's already measuring the curtains.
Right.
I'd start getting.
I know this is going to sound like a strange question, I suppose, but did anybody ever see this coming? Like 6 months ago, for example, when you were thinking Starmer's in a terrible. I've been sort of predicting the demise of Starmer since pretty much he got in, because I just thought as soon as the Lord Ali stuff came out, I was like, this guy's not going to last. He's not long for this world. But I never really saw Andy Burnham as the guy that would be the man that would unseat him. I always thought it would come from somewhere inside the Westminster bubble, which Burnham's been outside for a while.
Well, the difficulty obviously always faced was who was going to give up a seat for him. But we did hear last summer, we reported on Guido, that he was sniffing around. Now, I thought he would wait until the next general election, because I couldn't see, certainly standing from last summer, I couldn't see where he would find that seat. Then he had Andrew Gwynn, his friend Andrew Gwynn, who was stepping down. He tried to weasel his way in there, and that was going to be Gordon and Denton. That was in the offing for a very long time, several months. That was rumoured. obviously the NEC blocked it and thought they'd kill him off, and actually, it didn't make a blind bit of difference because 6 weeks later he was back. So this is not. This is obviously no accident. This hasn't happened overnight. It was planned, I would say, for at least a year, because it was about August that I first picked up on this.
Right, and if there is to be a new Andy Burnham style, Downing Street operation, what happens to all of the people like Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner and David Lammy? I mean, do they all get shuffled around? What happens?
Yeah, I think there'll be a big reshuffle. You'll need to reward your allies. Your Louise Hagues and your Lisa Nandys. They'll need a promotion. But you can't please, and perhaps Rayner as well. You can't please everyone, and you'll need to keep some of the Stam rights in the cabinet. It's always a mistake to just rely on your supporters and alienate wings of the party that don't naturally align with you, because then they start plotting against you, and we end up back on the Mike Graham show talking about the next resignation. So he'll need to try and unify, that god awful word, but he'll need to do that pretty quickly. Rachel Reeves, she's campaigning to keep her job, but I think they'd be nuts to keep her. She was tied to the hip to the Starmer project. She honestly is the reason it went wrong in the first place. The wheels would have come off at some point, but that winter fuel allowance disaster was entirely on her. Obviously, Starmer signed it off, but he just doesn't even read his brief, does he? So it's all on her. And it was really that they never recovered from that, and that was within weeks of the July 24 result. So she'll argue that the markets won't tolerate anyone else, but hilariously, politically, no one will tolerate her. So I would imagine that Burnham will boot her out. You end up with someone like a Miliband or maybe even a Streeting, although I think Streeting probably wants foreign secretary. Don't forget him. He might start a contest. He says he's got the support. I'm not sure about that, but
Well, I read a piece. I can't remember where I read it. I read a piece saying that he was spotted popping into John Healey's office at some point last week or the last couple of days, as if they were forming themselves into some kind of unholy alliance.
Yeah, this is all going on. I saw John Healey in Portcullis House, which is the sort of newer bit, the atrium of Parliament, and he was strolling around, happy as Larry, a couple of days ago. It's like there was a weight lifted off his shoulders. They're all plotting behind the scenes. This is we say this every time. I think I say this every time I come onto your show. They blame the Tories for chaos and all this, and now they're going to be different. Politics have changed. Blah blah blah. Adults in the room. I mean, look at all this crap. It's just
it is amazing.
It's like poetry. Yeah. But anyway, I was just going to say, Streeting might put up some sort of Potemkin fight, but that's really just to test Streeting's Burnham's ideas, such as they are, and give it the veneer of legitimacy. You want a coronation, but you want to pretend that you didn't have one. You want to pretend that it was a battle of ideas and all this nonsense. But there's absolutely
they are
bet the House on Burnham being prime minister within a few, at least by the end of the summer.
They are just a ghastly crowd, aren't they? Dreadful. But it keeps us all amused, I dare say. Keeps us all amused. Adam, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Adam Cherry from Guido Fawkes reporting in there from Makerfield. We're going to go to Makerfield in a moment because Ammon Bogle is there for us up there live in Makerfield. We'll talk to him to see what the lie of the land is the morning after the night before. And also Bishop Kai Dewar, our favourite bishop, of course. The bishop of this show will be here. Dorset Geezer says this on the Super Chats. I'm sure family voting helped out Andy Burnham. Maybe. I haven't heard that. We might ask Ammon Bogle about that to see whether he knows. Tommy says, what did Mike think of Lauren last night at the Count? Brave lady, I thought. Lauren the Insider, she was doing some great work working on being the representative of the Dan Wootton show at the Count. They wouldn't let her in, which is kind of bizarre to me. I don't understand why they wouldn't, because she's clearly working for a bona fide news organisation, but apparently, according to the producers that I spoke to last night, they said, oh no, they don't see us as anything other than YouTubers, so they don't let us in. This one from Voice for England. Burnham won 54% on the gigantic anti-Starmer vote. Yeah, I mean, he did very well because an awful lot of people turned out to vote who wouldn't otherwise have done so. I think was it 59% who turned out as the number for of people who actually voted, which is extraordinary. One from Red Rock is that despite all those who trumpet Farage, Ralph has him nailed with that description. Farage is a fraud, mind a rich fraud that does not worry about food bills, heating bills and filling up the car. I didn't hear Ralph calling him a fraud. I don't think he did. I think the point is that, you know, Nigel Farage has to straddle a slightly difficult sort of situation, it seems to me, because obviously he doesn't want to be part of the mainstream, but he kind of has to be part of the mainstream in order to get the success that he wants in the mainstream. It's as simple as that. This morning, Andy Burnham gets the whip suspended, says Matthew. Okay. Don't know what that means either. Is that sort of a cryptic message, perhaps? Another super chat from Rachel says the new Burnham alert should be the Scousers from the Harry Enfield show. He's already got the short shorts. Well, calm down, calm down. Should we do that? Yeah. Calm down. Anyway, listen, coming up, Evan Bogle up live from the very place, Makerfield. This from the Maxter. SNP got a greasy win in Arbroath and Broughty Ferry last night, but it is worrying that there's still some Conservatives in Scotland. Is it? Why is it worrying? There used to be, I mean, I remember we covered an election in Scotland, must have been around about, I guess, 2005-ish or 4-ish or something like that. And there was one constituency left for the Tories. And we did the guy up as the only gay in the village. It was funny. Lou says this on the super chat. Does Kelvin's new show start on Monday? I think it does, doesn't it?
Yes, we're finalising it today.
Eh?
Finalising it today.
Finalising it today. Yeah. Well, there's nothing like last minute preparation.
He's on holidays in Crete.
He's on holiday?
Yeah.
Is he?
That's why he's not been in this week.
Oh, crikey. I wondered, because I was going to say we haven't had him in this week. So Kelvin's new show, Kelvin Mackenzie's new show, starts at 10 o'clock on Monday. And we will see whether or not it stays at 10 o'clock on Monday, because Russell Quirk was doing it this week from 10 o'clock. So it may well be that Russell will do another show at another time. We shall see. Could we expect any other result when Labour are counting the votes, says Sue. Well, I see what you did there, and I noticed that. But I mean, they did win by a big margin, and I think even the Reform Party headquarters people would confess that actually it was bigger than they expected it to be honest. And there's not much you can do if loads of people vote for other parties and your party doesn't get as many votes. There's not really anything you can do. Coming up, though, as I say, Bishop Kai Jura is going to be here with his sermon for the weekend, and Eamon Bogle as well, who's up there in Makerfield. Should we have some news with Edmund Hughes first?
Let's go to Eamon.
Hey?
Let's go to Eamon.
Let's what?
He's here.
Oh, you don't want to do
We've got
news?
Ellie Hodges as well checking in.
Oh, we got Ellie Hodges as well. Okay, so we're not going to do news then. All right, forget news. Let's talk to Eamon Bogle instead, who's up in Makerfield. Eamon, a very good morning to you.
Yes, good morning, Mike. Yes, good to be back on your show. And yes, it's I spent a day yesterday knocking on doors here in Makerfield for my party, Reform UK.
Yeah.
And I think, look, this morning shows us that we've now got a reorientation of British politics, right? We won nearly 16,000 votes. Vote share up 2.7%. And in 2019, it was the Conservatives which got 15,000 votes. And this time they lost their deposit. And, you know, the bottom line here is, I think, that Reform is now the challenger party of the right in Britain. And what we had here was a popular local mayor, just like Boris was in London, and then he went on to win in Uxbridge. And in many ways, I think if you look at it, Andy Burnham stole Reform's primary slogan. You know, we were saying vote Reform, get Starmer out. And he was like, well, vote Burnham and get Starmer out. And that's what people chose.
Right. So are you quite encouraged by the numbers then? Because, I mean, there are some who I've been speaking to this morning who have said that Reform got a bit of a bloody nose, and were it not for the fact that Andy Burnham was running, Reform really should have won.
Well, I mean, there's all sorts of analysis that will go on over the next few days and weeks, but the bottom line is that what matters is what we face next, and that is a summer of Labour chaos. You know, we're going to see resignations left, right, and centre. We're going to see more desperation from Keir Starmer. You know, and then we're going to end up the summer with a Prime Minister Burnham with no mandate in the middle of a parliament and no real plan for change. And you know what? If people see that and they will see that Labour had 14 years to put together a cohesive plan to deal with the challenges that this country faces, and they didn't. And U-turn after U-turn. We have another summer of the Dinghiwala arrivals across the channel, as we saw yesterday and the day before. Well, you know what? The Conservatives might have their pockets of vote around the country, and the same applies for Labour. But the ultimate bottom line is, I think this will give reform look. Of course, not winning. It's a sad morning, but we can't take away from the fact that thousands of reform activists came together from around the country, and we got a higher vote share than before.
And of course, the next project, I suppose, for reform is the mayoral vacancy in Manchester. Now that Andy Burnham's won the seat in Makerfield, he's going to go down to London and be sworn in, I think, on Monday. So Richard Tice was in here the other day, and he said that, well, he gave the impression anyway that the Reform have chosen a candidate. I'm not expecting you to reveal who that might be, but how soon before that can be announced, do you think?
Well, I think Manchester now needs a mayor urgently, because even if you look at Andy Burnham's record, it has not really been all that great in terms of, well, all the things he promised, right? He promised to build a lot more social housing, a lot more houses per se, and he only built, I think, one in his first year as mayor. Same thing with the cleaner air zone, right? He didn't deliver what he promised on the tin. So all these things have to be sorted out in Manchester. And I think reform in the locals did well around Manchester. And I think that candidate needs to come literally, in the next couple of weeks, and we need to hit the ground running. We have momentum behind us. But look, we're going to face this now. Imagine, if you will, a Prime Minister Burnham with no mandate, a eco-zealot Chancellor in Ed Miliband, Lucy Powell probably as Deputy Prime Minister, and Angela Rayner probably brought in as Home Secretary to try and gaslight the British public into thinking they're going to stop the boats finally, and David Miliband brought back from the doldrums with a peerage to be Foreign Secretary. I mean, this is going to be a cabinet of curiosities. And that's not what Britain deserves. Britain deserves a proper government that's going to sort out all the issues that we face. And the biggest issues that we face right now is a dwindling economy. We have today news, right? Payroll employees down 138,000 year on year, unemployment at 5%, and the claimant count at 1.7 million. And we're still paying £1 billion in universal credit to foreign nationals every month. This cannot go on.
It can't go on, and we have more and more people asking for fewer and fewer people to pay for their existence, and it's just not sustainable, is it? But I mean, I don't see any way the Labour government is ever going to change that, though.
No, and things will only get worse with Andy Burnham. And I think Labour internally think that with Keir Starmer, the whole Labour Party is finished, and this might be the last throw of the dice to try and recover some of what they had won in the last general election. I mean, I've always said that the Labour Party won a sandcastle majority that has withered away ever since. And they're trying to recover that. And I think this internal Labour psychodrama is being foisted upon the country for no other reason other than to protect their own seats. And it's about time we had a general election, let the people have the say, and see what they want for the country. And I think most right-minded people they certainly want to stop the boats. They certainly want to stop the massive amounts of money being given out in universal credit to people who shouldn't even be here. They want to stop the influx of hundreds of thousands of people coming into the country, changing our culture and socio-economics forever. And they want to stop the fleeing of hundreds of thousands of British-born people being forced to flee Starmer's communist hellhole that he's trying to build.
Yeah, I know. So many people are not happy about what their lot is. But the difficulty is that you can't really see how Andy Burnham is going to improve anybody's life. How they're going to improve anybody's, kind of day-to-day living expenses, or, just their ability to make ends meet. It's just not going to happen.
Well, first of all, this is open borders Burnham, right? He wants to welcome more people who want to fleece off hard-working British taxpayers. He's more to the left of even Keir Starmer. So what is he going to deliver with his cabinet of curiosities? He's going to deliver higher taxes, more than already we are being fleeced. He's going to deliver more open borders, while probably trying to gaslight the British public into thinking, well, I'm trying to stop the boats, one in, one out, all that circus all over again. And he's going to say, well, you know what? It's not the people who shouldn't be here that are taking money from you. It's the big corporates. He's going to say, well, oh, it's not the Labour government that's at fault. It's the previous works of the Conservative government. And he will play all those cards. But ultimately, as you say, Mike, it's not going to make a positive difference to the average life of the average Brit by an iota. What it will do is it'll make us poorer. With Ed Miliband as Chancellor, it'll make us even colder, and it will certainly not make us more prosperous.
No, definitely won't. And not much to look forward to there. But Ammon, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Ammon Bogle there, reporting into us from Makerfield. We are going to talk to, I think, Ellie Hodges at some point.
Yeah, she's nearly here.
Nearly here. Okay.
Bish first?
We could go to the Bish first. It's up to you. He's got to do his sermon, though, of course. So it's a matter of whether you want to do that, or I could just talk about a couple of other stories if you wish. Should we do that? Because the story that is on front pages this morning that we haven't done an awful lot with, because it's one of those stories that's actually quite disturbing, is that a boy aged 3, he's on the front page of the Sun and the Mail, was last night in critical condition after he was hurled 15 feet down into a crocodile enclosure by a stranger. And what it looks like is another one of those cases. You might remember a few years ago, the terrible case of the kid who was thrown off the roof, or the sort of the terrace, if you like, of the Tate Modern, and it turned out that the person who did it was somebody who was, in their own way vulnerable, and possibly not in control of their, faculties, and they basically, decided for some bizarre reason to take it upon themselves to pick up this child and throw them over the railings from the top of the building, which obviously was quite high. Same case here, by the looks of it, the person who has been arrested by the police in Cambridge, because this happened in Huntingdon in Cambridge at a place called the Johnsons of Oldhurst Zoo. The person who's been arrested for doing this, a terrible attack on a 3-year-old, is thought to have been somebody who you might describe as vulnerable, somebody who you might describe as, shall we say, not entirely in control of all their faculties. And you know what that's like. And it's such a terrible, awful story. Front page of the Daily Mail says, toddler critical after being thrown into crocodile pit at zoo. And it says, last night, witnesses said the little boy's rescuer was Tracy Johnson with the zoo's owner, Andy Johnson. A man of 30 was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. Police said they do not believe that the suspect and the victim know each other. And in fact, the child was said to be in a critical but stable condition. The shocking incident took place in front of horrified visitors inside the tropical reptile house at Johnson's of Oldhurst near Huntingdon in Cambridgeshire. The zoo is run by fourth-generation farmer Mr. Johnson, his wife and their sons George and Edward. So terrible story, really awful. Anyway, how are we fixed with Ellie?
She was here and now she's gone.
She was here and now she's gone. Okay.
Oh, she's here again.
Is she back?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's try and see if we can get to the streets of Makerfield with the lovely Ellie Hodges, who's been working very hard. And I'm sure, I don't know if you had any sleep, Ellie. Very good morning to you.
I have not had barely any sleep. I have had maybe
Me
2 hours sleep. So if I'm not the sharpest tool in the box this morning, that is why.
No, listen, we may both drift off at some point or other during the conversation, because I'm the same. I did a couple of hours with Dan Wotton last night, and I got home at about sort of 1ish, and I thought, right, great, I'll go to sleep. I'll get 3 hours sleep, 4 hours sleep. And then I thought, but then I couldn't go to sleep, because I was like, well, I've got to wait up now and see the result. And then the Aberdeen South result came in, and then of course the Makerfield result came in. So how's it been? How have you found it? What's been going on?
So it's been really exciting actually. So I got here yesterday morning and then I spent the whole day kind of going around speaking to people, seeing what the mood was, knocking
Yeah.
on people's doors and just speaking to them, asking if they want to come and talk on camera. And it was really interesting actually just talking to the people of Makerfield because they were just saying to me, you know, they've been bombarded with leaflets, with journalists, with campaigners knocking on their door all the time that they're actually just kind of glad the by-election's over. um, but I think it was clear that Andy Burnham was going to win this by-election by being on the streets. Whilst there was a strong reform presence, you could tell that the majority of people were voting for Andy Burnham. There was lots of Andy Burnham signs everywhere you went. And when I spoke to people on the doorsteps, I found that he's a very Marmite figure. People either love him or they hate him, and there was no in between. But a lot of people actually said as well, I'm voting for Burnham just because I hate Nigel Farage. So I think there was some of that as well. But I do think that Reform need to learn from Andy Burnham's campaign because love him or hate him, and I'm sure the majority of people on here aren't the biggest fans, he ran a great campaign and he got lots of people behind him and he was successful. So I think, you know, when another by-election comes up, which I'm sure will be very soon, need to take some tips off of how he ran his campaign.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that Reform should have won. If it hadn't been for the fact that Andy Burnham was the Labour candidate, they probably would have won. Alan Bogle there, just we spoke to a minute ago, actually though was quite upbeat from Reform's point of view. He said, you know, we've got more votes than we thought we would get. You know, there was a big turnout, and we've actually increased the vote that we got at the by-election. And maybe unlucky for them in a way that Rob Kenyon, when he was first appointed as the candidate, as the local guy, was kind of out-localed, if you like, by Andy Burnham, who was kind of, you know, also the local guy, you know, and he wasn't somebody who was carpet bagged in and all of that. But what have you made of the Restore Reform kind of feud that's been going on? Because that's been quite a bit, making a few headlines as well.
Yeah, it's been really, really interesting. And I don't think the result that they got was something they hoped for. I think they expected they were going to get a bigger share of the vote. But I don't think it's fair to say in this instance that they did split the right because they didn't actually get enough votes to do that. But I do think that, you know, I understand why some people have gone to Restore, and I think it's unfair. As someone who is very critical of Restore, I will admit that. I think it's unfair to say that they're just an online party now. You know, being on the streets here and being on the streets even in London, talking to people, people know who Rupert Lowe is now. They know who Restore is. They are on the map. But it's going to be extremely unfortunate if we're going to end up with, you know, a lab-lib coalition because the right has been split.
Right. So do you think that then it's right to say that more people recognise Restore and will vote for them as time goes on, if you like?
Maybe. I think so. But I think that, you know, Nigel Farage's video this morning was really good, where he kind of said, you know, we have one chance to save this country and we need to be voting for one party on the right for that to happen. And I think that's a really fair argument to make. And, you know, Rupert has said himself, when asked, if Andy Burnham gets in and it's because of you, how will you feel? And the answer was, I don't really care. So I think that Restore is just an anti-Nigel party. And when you look at Rupert Lowe's Twitter and you look at Restore's Twitter, you scroll down. I did this a couple of days ago. It might have changed now. But scrolling down in the past 3 days, there was just anti-reform things. There was no anti-Labour, no anti-Conservatives. It was just anti-reform, which I think is actually quite ridiculous because in terms of their actual political ideology, they're closer than any of the other parties. So I think that's also quite ridiculous. But I don't think, you know, we should underestimate Restore because I think that we need to actually acknowledge them and talk about why people are being attracted to them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely. It's good to talk to you, Ellie. Hopefully you get some sleep at some point soon. I'm going to get home very shortly after this, in about 9 minutes, actually. And I've been given release. I was supposed to do Plank of the Week, but they've said you don't have to do it. So I'm going to go home and sleep.
Go home and crash in your bed.
Well, the worst thing is I've got to go to a party tonight, so I've got to be, I've got to be
Oh,
sorted.
what a
But anyway.
shame. I'm sure you'll recover for that, Mike.
I'll try. I will. Absolutely right. Ellie, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for helping us out. And thank you very much indeed for all the stuff that you do throughout the course of the week and the year as well. Right now, though, coming up to 10 minutes to 10, we're almost out of time, but we've got to say hello to the greatest bishop of all time, Kai Dewar, who is here from Welsh Wales. Kai, very good morning to you.
Good morning. You. I was going to say you look rested after your holiday, but after last night, I'm taking all that back.
Well, I mean, yeah, I've completely destroyed my sort of my recovery by not sleeping. Well, it's one of those things, you know what it's like. You get home. I got home. I was down Wootton until midday. Midnight rather, got home at 1 o'clock and thought, right, I'll put my head down for 4 hours and then I'll come back to work. And of course, I couldn't go to sleep, so I just got back up again and started watching the counts and all the rest of it, So I ended up getting about 1 hour sleep.
All the time.
Yeah, exactly right.
When I've got early starts, I can't sleep either.
Yeah, I know, it's mad. Anyway, listen, so I don't want to impinge on you too much. So should we start? Should we just go straight into the to your sermon, because it's always so uplifting and brilliant. And I don't want to cause you to have to cut it short. So let's go straight into it.
Let's do it, because it has been quite a week.
It has.
A week in which difficult truths have been laid bare before the nation. A week in which political victories and political defeats are now dominating the headlines. A week in which reports have been published, elections have been fought, statements have been issued, and debates have continually raged. And on a rather more personal note, a week in which I finally received a response from Buckingham Palace to my letter to His Majesty the King. And for many, it feels as though we are living through an age of deep uncertainty. Trust is fragile. Our institutions are weakened. We've seen our communities are very divided. Many look at Britain and ask a question that is becoming increasingly common. Is there any hope left for us? And it's an understandable question, because when darkness gathers, hope can seem like a luxury. When truth appears hidden, hope can seem naive. When leaders disappoint us, hope can seem misplaced. But the Christian faith was born in circumstances far darker than these of today. The first Christians did not inherit a flourishing Christian nation. They inherited a pagan empire, an empire marked by corruption, violence, the pagan religion, oppression, and moral confusions. The apostles, they didn't stand in cathedrals. They stood in prisons. They stood before hostile authorities. They stood in marketplaces where they were mocked. They stood in a world that appeared to be moving in exactly the wrong direction. And yet, those early apostles, they changed the world. Not because they possessed political power, not because they controlled the institutions, not because they dominated the culture, but because they possessed something infinitely greater. My brothers, my sisters, they possessed hope. Not optimism, hope. Because there is a major difference. Optimism says things will probably get better. But the Christian hope says, even if they don't, Christ is still King. Optimism depends entirely upon circumstances, and hope depends upon God. That is why the Apostle Paul could write from prison, rejoice in the Lord always. Not rejoice in the government, not rejoice in the economy, not rejoice in public opinion. Rejoice in the Lord. Because governments rise and governments fall. Kings come and go. Political parties triumph and they decline, as we see. Reports are published and they are soon forgotten. But Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The great temptation in moments like these is despair. Despair whispers that nothing can change. Despair tells us that decline is inevitable. Despair tells us that the darkness has already won. But despair is not and never has been a Christian virtue. Despair is what happens when we measure the future by our own strength. Hope is what happens when we measure the future by God's strength. And history excuse me, history repeatedly shows us that God does his greatest work when circumstances appear most hopeless. When Joseph sat in prison, when Daniel stood in Babylon, when Esther entered the throne room, when Elijah believed he was all but alone, when the disciples hid behind locked doors after the crucifixion. For each of them, everything appeared lost. Yet God was already preparing the next chapter. That is why Christians are called to be the calmest people in the room, not because we ignore reality, not because we pretend everything is fine, but because we know that history ultimately belongs to Christ. The headlines may belong to others, the future belongs to him. So, I want to encourage every one of you watching today, do not surrender your peace to the news cycle. Do not allow social media to become the measure of your hope. Do not allow politicians, commentators, or public figures to determine whether you believe tomorrow can be better than today. My brothers, my sisters, lift your eyes higher. Look beyond Westminster. Look beyond Whitehall. Look beyond Buckingham Palace. Look beyond every institution and every earthly authority. And lift your eyes to the throne of heaven. Because there, my brothers and sisters, there is no panic. There is no confusion. There is no emergency meeting. There is no crisis management committee. There, the Lord reigns. The Lord reigned yesterday. The Lord reigns today. And the Lord will still reign tomorrow. And because he reigns, Christians can stand firm. We speak truth without fear. We can love without bitterness. We can serve without resentment. We can pray without ceasing. And we can hope without limit. Britain may be passing through one of its most difficult seasons, but winter is never the end of the story. The God who brings spring to barren fields can bring renewal to barren hearts. The God who raised Lazarus can revive nations. The God who rolled away the stone can remove obstacles that appear immovable. For nothing is impossible for him. So my brothers, my sisters, be encouraged, stand firm, pray fervently, love courageously, speak truth graciously, and remember this, the darkness in our nation may be loud, but I promise you dawn is coming. The darkness always believes it has won until the sun rises. My brothers, my sisters, our sun has already risen, and his name is Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Amen indeed. Bish, great to see you. Have a wonderful weekend, and you're getting so good at this, you can actually finish it just in time before we have to go to the news, because now we've got this new scenario where we've got other shows doing. The UK Live Online is a burgeoning media empire that we've got going on. So we've got Lembit Opik about to start, who's also got a bit of a Welsh connection as well. So listen, great to see you. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you very much indeed. As ever, your words are very inspiring and people are loving it. Lots of people are saying I'm falling asleep sitting here. I'm not actually falling asleep. I'm just in quiet contemplation, which is...
what a beautiful place to be.
It is, absolutely. And your words are always so beautiful that they make me feel better just listening to them. So thank you very much.
Mike.
Indeed.
Have a wonderful weekend. See you soon.
And see you too. Yeah, absolutely. Hev Chip says, Mike, be careful driving home. I'll be fine. You must remember that I am not a wilting flower. I've been doing this, I was going to say SH1T a long time. I used to. I have, but that's okay. I'm allowed to do that. Once in a while, I'm going to swear. Once in a while, I'm going to say things that you might not like. Once in a while, I'm going to be a bit tired. Once in a while, I'm going to be a bit over-exuberant. Sometimes, I might even be angry, because that's the show. That's what we do. We never pretend to be anything that we're not, and we always are, as we should be, ourselves, okay? So it's been an amazing week. I'm glad to be back from holiday. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to go home and sleep because I have to go and then be entertaining later on at a little soiree, which we'll tell you about on Monday. Thanks to Charlotte, thanks to Pooch, and thanks to Elena, who's next door producing Lembit Opic. Thanks to all of you for listening. Thanks to all of you for all of your contributions. And we will see you tonight for Plank of the Week, which will be possibly looking a bit familiar because it's going to not be fresh. But then a Plonk of the Week goes out tomorrow night. And of course, we'll be back at 7 o'clock on a Monday morning with another fabulous show for you and another fabulous week of news. And who knows, maybe Keir Starmer will have already agreed to leave Downing Street. How great would that be? Amazing. I'm going to rub my hands with glee. Let it be true. Let it be true. All right, I'll see you. Have a good weekend.
Good morning. I'm Edward Hughes with your Friday Bulletin. Labour's Andy Burnham has decisively won the Makerfield by-election with a strong majority over Reform UK, clearing the path for a potential leadership challenge against Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The Conservatives achieved a historic breakthrough in Scotland, winning the Aberdeen South Westminster seat, their first such by-election victory north of the border in over 50 years. Economically, the Bank of England held interest rates steady, while new analysis highlighted Brexit's long-term drag on UK growth. Amber heat health alerts are active as forecasters predict temperatures rising above 30 degrees Celsius, with a potential heatwave this weekend. Tensions with Russia persist after reports of a Russian warship firing warning shots near a UK-registered yacht in the English Channel. Remember to like and subscribe. Laters, Tigers.